I'll start over and I'll call to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Tuesday, July 6, 2021, and welcome everyone. Hopefully will our next one be in City Hall? The 19th? No, that's the day you move. All right, so we'll have one more meeting like this, and then August we go full tilt boogie in the new building. Yoo-hoo. So we won't have a Pledge of Allegiance tonight. And so item 2 is the agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of agenda items? Seeing none, except we have a special guest who is arriving, we believe, around 7. So
7:30 or 7:45.
Okay, so we will interrupt wherever if it's a public hearing, we won't interrupt. That's short. Hopefully that'll be over at 7:45, and then we'll add in one small special item between items 7 and 8. It's a special welcome for Jessie. So this is kind of exciting to start the our first meeting with Jessie fully at the helm. So we're looking forward to years of good work with you, and so hope all has gone well so far. Great. And Tim is here, so we're at full boat. Tom Chittenden is not able to join us. He's in Florida. So item 3 then is comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. So if there's anyone in the public who wishes to discuss something, like Jason Chin, you turn on your picture and your microphone. And so Jason, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to my comment. I'm here today to express my concerns about the threat of climate change and to encourage the City Council to keep climate mitigation measures at the forefront of all of your work. The litany of problems that climate change is causing is familiar by now, from the rising seas and the melting ice and heat waves and forest fires and so on. And I know I have crisis fatigue, so I'm not going to try and list them all off for you, because I'm sure you're familiar. Maybe you have crisis fatigue too. But I thought I'd start by just leaving you with some dark humor that did resonate with me recently. There was a cartoon of Bart and Homer Simpson. Bart says, "Man, this is the hottest summer of my life." Homer says, "Well, on the bright side, son, it's going to be the coolest summer of the rest of your life." And that's it in a nutshell. This is a problem that's getting worse. Every decade is hotter than the last. And at the rate we're going, it will only get worse for the rest of my life and the rest of your life. But if we act now, there's a chance that the climate will begin to cool down in our children's lifetime. And if we're lucky, maybe in ours too. So that's what I'm asking of you. Please act. You're in a position of power. You have influence. You can make decisions that make it easier to confront climate change, or you can make decisions that will put a greater burden on future generations. Of course, I want you to choose the former. I would like to see you plan for a future where South Burlington is a net zero greenhouse gas emitter, where we contribute no net greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere. Man, I'm sorry, it's very hot, and to prove my point, the room I'm in is very hot. I'm sweating. Where we contribute no net greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere. And I know that's hard to imagine. It's not the reality we live in today. But luckily, there are experts who have worked on these issues and found a variety of solutions for us. We don't have to do all the imagining alone. So here are some actions that I believe should be part of the solution. One, I'd like to see us transition to net zero buildings. Some of that is ongoing, but I would like to see it happen as fast as possible. 2, we need to prioritize ecosystem conservation. We have forests. Forests store carbon. If we cut them down, we lose a critical tool for removing carbon from the atmosphere. And I'd like to see development that reduces vehicle miles traveled. Transportation is a huge part of our greenhouse gas footprint in Vermont, and we need to change this. One of the ways is, I think, that would be useful, is concentrated development that makes public transit, walking and biking practical. So these are a few measures I think will help and that you have influence over. But there are many more actions you could take. There are many that I can't imagine that you can. Which is why I hope you will keep the vision of a greenhouse gas neutral future for South Burlington at the forefront of your work. That future is possible, but whether we get there or not depends on your choices. So I urge you, for the sake of our security and health and economy, and for the glaciers and the forest fires and the droughts and so on and so forth, to put our city on a course that will contribute to climate stability. This might be the coolest summer of the rest of my life, but it doesn't have to be for my children. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I appreciate all your work.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think Beth would like to speak, and then Donna, would you like to also? Okay, so we'll hear from Beth Zygmunt first, and then Roseanne Greco after Donna Lieben.
Yeah, hi, and thank you to the City Council for hearing my comments. I have to echo everything that Jason Chin said. That's also why I'm here tonight. I am a physician at the University of Vermont Medical Center. I also volunteer for the Vermont chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm also a volunteer of the Vermont Climate and Health Alliance and a national organization called Healthcare Without Harm. And, you know, just to sort of elaborate on some of the points that Jason was making, you know, we're finally in Vermont, I think we're at a point where we can maybe hopefully be looking at COVID-19 in the rearview mirror. But there is clearly another growing health crisis upon us. In the last 2 weeks, in the Pacific Northwest, hundreds of patients were seen in emergency rooms and urgent care centers for heat-related illnesses, drownings because people were desperate to escape from the heat. There were hundreds more seeking refuge from the heat in air-conditioned public spaces. Meanwhile, wildfires are already consuming parts of California. Earlier in the season, every single year, there was flooding in Michigan last week. The governor of Michigan declared an emergency, a state emergency because of severe flooding. So, you know, I think that we in Vermont, if we're looking to the West, we should be concerned. I don't think that we're immune to such catastrophes and such health-related crises. This is fundamentally a crisis that's about our health, the health of our children and our grandchildren, and that's not separate from the health of the planet that we live on, obviously. So I'm here. You know, I could just reiterate everything that Jason Chin said to be, you know, to add emphasis, but I don't think that's necessary. So just, you know, overall, I'm here to urge every member of the City Council to please do what you can to confront this crisis and pass the resolution, the climate change resolution that was recently put before you. I think that, you know, if the local government doesn't have specific goals, then we're nowhere. Federal government is consumed with partisan fighting. We had oil executives, oil lobbyists on video last week, you know, admitting to undercover you know, reporters from UK Greenpeace that, you know, they don't expect any action on the federal level because they basically own the very politicians who would be, you know, pivotal in advancing those policies. the state government is moving as quickly as it can, I think now, but we need to support the state government and have specific targets on the local level that are in alignment with the Global Warming Solution Act and the Paris Accord. So I'm here to very strongly urge every council member to please vote yes on the climate change resolution. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Donna Lehman.
Yes. Hi, thanks, and thanks for giving me a chance to just have a say this evening. This is going to be very brief, actually. I've been paying a lot of attention to the work of the Vermont Climate Council, and one of the things they're going to be doing is directing the state of Vermont to consider carbon dioxide reduction planning in their next budget year. So budgeting for the state and hopefully local towns and cities will become a little bit different. It'll become a little bit different because it will consider not only costs and benefits on a dollar basis, but also carbon dioxide reduction. So if you're considering two different contracts or two different choices, that carbon reduction becomes a part of each of those choices. And that has to start happening at every decision point, because every project that happens, every planning decision, every one of those involves choices between, do we add carbon or can we create a carbon reduction plan? And simply that's basically what I think the city can do and needs to do in terms of climate action. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roseanne?
Yes, thank you. And I also echo what Donna just said, what Beth said, what Jason said. I want to share with you, if you allow me, a few paragraphs from a book I just discovered. It's called All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. It's edited by Anya Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkerson. And I want to read a few paragraphs from a chapter written by Kendra Pierre-Louise. She is an African-American reporter and journalist, worked for the New York Times, Popular Science, Inside Climate News. She's the author of the book Greenwashed. And she writes a chapter, and the title of the chapter is Wakanda Doesn't Have Suburbs. If you don't know what Wakanda is, it's a mythical homeland in the movie Black Panther. And this chapter is about the message that we get from this mythical place, Wakanda. She starts by saying that she grew up in New York City, and she says, and I quote, "There was a critical undercurrent of history and science classes, for example, and the idea was perpetual progress. That progress, we are taught, has always come at the cost of the environment, from smog-filled skies to landscapes devoid of birds, as chronicled in Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. And of course, the idea of progress itself implies that there is something wrong with the present and with our place in it." And the heart of what she says is about Wakanda. She says the message of Wakanda is that there is a country whose greatest technological achievements is maintaining its environment. And then I'm quoting, "It's a vision of a modern civilization that looks and feels drastically different from the United States, where an estimated 52% of Americans describe their neighborhood as suburbs. Suburbs emerged in part because cities were polluted with bad air quality and substandard housing. But rather than address those issues, we simply relocated our population and created new issues, not least among them an increased climate impact. Studies have shown that suburb dwellers have greater greenhouse gas emissions than their urban counterparts. Cities that have more green space are naturally cooler, requiring less air conditioning, lower energy use, and making it easier to reduce fossil fuel use and rely on renewable energy. They also reduce the likelihood of minor flooding because, unlike cement or concrete hardscaping, soil absorbs water instead of having it run off. Green spaces also provide a host of psychological benefits, from improving mood and behavior to speeding up healing and increasing students' ability to learn. Eliminating suburbs and their longer distant counterparts, exurbs, if that's how you pronounce it, could be one way of slashing the country's ecological footprint. No suburbs mean fewer roads to fragment ecosystems, making it easier for animals and plants to survive, promoting biodiversity. Roads also use a lot of cement, which is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as sand, which is often acquired by dredging rivers and other critical ecosystems. These impacts happen regardless of whether or not the vehicle in question runs on gas, electricity, or the hopes and dreams of future generations. It's the whole structure of suburban life and car dependence that's the problem. An end quote. So what does this mean for South Burlington? We are turning into one big suburb. I moved here about 13 and a half years ago. I started attending planning commission meetings about 10 years or so ago. I remember that planning commissions at the time were saying the last thing we wanted was more suburban sprawl, while at the same time writing regulations that encourage suburban sprawl. All the developments you see in the rural spaces, the Southeast Quadrant and other places, are suburban sprawl. Since I moved here, I think at least 1,000 more homes have been added to suburban sprawl. You're contemplating doing something, perhaps, I hope, on our land regulations. Even PUDs, even green PUDs, are suburban sprawl. If we want to get a handle on the climate crisis and actually do something, you councilors have the power to do it. Put the dots together, protect the ecosystems, and stop suburban sprawl. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Roseanne. Steve Crowley would like to speak next. Megan, do you need to comment first?
My daughter would like to say something too, whenever Steve's done. That's
Okay,
fine.
when Steve's done, then we can listen to Naomi. Thank you. Steve, you have the floor.
Great, thanks very much. I will try to be brief here. I just want to add my voice to the people who've spoken about developing a strong plan for South Burlington on climate change. I think it's worth thinking about that question, and I know you've talked about it before in your meetings about, how can an entity like South Burlington play a role in this? And I think there are some really important ways that South Burlington can play a role in this. We can't, do the kinds of mandates that could happen at a national level or even state level, but there are things we can do. And I think, some things that need to happen, that are going to need to happen, can't really be mandated, or we don't want to live in a society where we go around mandating people's individual behavior right and left. So, but I think, at the local level, we have an opportunity to do some of that work. We can help each other understand, we can convince each other, we can set up systems where people really start to understand what the challenges are. So I think that's a critical role for local government and other institutions to play. I also want to mention, we have to reduce greenhouse gases, certainly, and the faster the better. There's no question about that. But we still have this challenge to face. This isn't going away. It is guaranteed to get worse. It's going to keep getting worse and worse for a decade or two. even if we were to stop emitting greenhouse gases tomorrow. So we've got to figure out a lot of strategies for adaptation. You know, the COVID crisis gives us some examples of how local people can really step up and help make that happen. I just want to mention a few specific examples that I think are particular to a place like South Burlington. Well, first of all, is our infrastructure resilient enough to handle the kinds of changes that are in the works for us? You know, the Marshall Ave Bridge is a good example, but you know, are we really ready for this? What do we have to do to be ready? What about our outdoor workers? This is an area that really concerns me a lot. And I know we have a lot of outdoor workers in South Burlington, people that work for the Public Works or Recreation. What has just happened in the Northwest, hopefully that we don't see that here, but we will certainly see, in our lifetimes, the heat wave that lasts all summer. I'm talking, you know, 87, 90 degrees that lasts all summer long. How is that going to affect our rec department programs? How is that going to affect our workers outside? How does it affect our schools? You know, do we need to have air conditioning or preferably heat pumps cooling every classroom? These are real concerns that we could be thinking about, and really we should be thinking about at the local level. And the last thing I'll mention is that the impacts that I'm talking about are, and many of the impacts of climate change are likely to be felt unevenly by different members of our population. Food is an example where, you know, as food prices increase, you know, a lot of us will do just fine with a small increase in food prices, but for some people that's just not the case. And so the lines that we saw during the worst of the COVID crisis to collect food are you know, we have to be ready so that doesn't have to happen. So a lot of those things are really non-regulatory issues that a place like South Burlington can play a big role in. So I hope that as you consider rolling out a climate action plan and everything, that those are part of the thinking here as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Naomi, is she ready?
Yeah.
And then Ray Gonda. Hi, Naomi.
Hi. I would like to read the first stanza of America the Beautiful.
Of the what?
I would like to read the first stanza of America the Beautiful.
Good.
Okay. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy God with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. There you go.
Okay,
She's just learning that piece, so she wanted to read it.
great. Ray Gonda. And then is there anyone else besides Ray, or is he the last person? Looks like it. Okay, you have the floor, Ray.
Okay, this is going to be very short. I'm Ray Gonda from South Burlington. This will be really short, and my thinking on this is inchoate at the moment, but still I just want to plant a seed. Today, there was an article published in Vermont Digger that talks about the Nature Conservancy, or is it the Vermont Land Trust? Anyhow, Jim Shallow's the man who's doing this, a person I've known for some years, about getting credits, trading credits for carbon sequestration in protected forests here in Vermont. Now they're just starting this program to see if it works out, but the thought that came to me was we're in the process of proposing to protect forested habitat blocks here. And it probably each one of those separately is not big enough to join a program like this. But quite possibly, if either landowners got together or there were a city program or even a private program to associate the landowners with each other so that they could get carbon credits, they could get some return on forested habitat blocks that we're purporting to protect. So that's the seed I want to plant. I have put a link in the chat box to that article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions from the public, we'll move on to item 4, announcements and the city manager's report. Do any of the councilors have announcements? Tim Barrett.
I attended the renaming of the the Underwood Park to the Thomas Hubbard Park with a lot of other people. It was a really great affair. So proud that we had the opportunity to honor Mr. Hubbard with that name. And so I just wanted to convey that. That was a great time. I also attended the economic development meeting last Monday, and Art Kluge was there to talk about Beta Technologies and their expansion plans. And it's very, very, very hopeful. And they're looking to probably build a 200,000 square foot facility out in back of the Pete's RV area on the quarry area of the airport. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Megan, Matt? Matt and I were also at the naming ceremony, and Megan was there on a cell phone that her husband was holding. So I would agree with you. And ironically, before that meeting, my husband said, you know that property on Nolan Farm Road, I never can remember it. And I told him, well, now it has a name, Hubbard Park, and you'll be able to remember that. So it was a nice thing to do. Okay, our city managers first report to us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you all here. I do have 2 guests here in the room with me tonight as well, so thank you for joining. I have a few updates I'd like to share with you all in the community tonight. One, thank you for your patience with these hybrid meetings as we kind of 2 things at the end of the state of emergency and the City Hall move collide into one another. We will be doing primarily virtual meetings tonight and on July 19th. With an in-person option as required now by state law, and really appreciate everyone's patience. I do want to make a quick comment on that about the chat. While we like information being shared in community dialogue, if you are using the chat for discussion, please know that that may not be part of the public record. And if there's information you want to share, please uncamera yourselves and share it verbally with the full council so it can become part of the public record. 2 other quick updates for the council. One is because our servers will be moving on July 14th, we will be warning the July 19th meeting on the 13th. So you'll be getting that packet earlier in order to ensure that goes smoothly with the server move. Additionally, we may need a very short in-person special council meeting on the 23rd, right before the grand opening, to both set the tax rate and approve the warrant, since we will not be able to do a warrant with the server move next week. So just a heads up about that, more to come. One fun note about the server move next week, because there will be a day where those of us who work in City Hall will be without email and the server. We are having a day of service. So all of those employees will be out in our parks doing different cleanup activities, weeding and painting some of our dugouts. So look for city employees running around the city on the 14th. Couple of other quick updates. Last week, we were notified by the Vermont Economic Progress Council that that the governor did sign Act 73 that allows our debt incursion period in the TIF district to extend by 1 year. So that's through March of 2024. That's very good news, and we're very thankful to the legislature and governor for doing that. It does not extend the end of our increment period. So the TIF will still expire in 2037. Later this week, Andrew and I will be participating in a briefing for municipalities by the Attorney General's office on his efforts to litigate and settle some of the lawsuits around the opioid crisis. And we hope to bring additional information back to you on what that may mean for us here locally in South Burlington. Just a heads up to the council and the community that we expect construction to start on the Allen Road shared use path on July 12th. That will continue through this construction season, likely with small cleanup being done right at the beginning of next construction season. The Wheeler wayfinding signage is almost entirely installed. We're just waiting on the kiosks. It looks really great. There's never been wayfinding signage there before, so encourage folks to get out to the Wheeler House and check out those new trails. And then two quick last things. The city is supporting a Yale University climate change resiliency study at the new Hubbard Park. This will go on for about 4 years, researching different local habitat and how animals and fauna interact. So the public may see about 200 cages set up through that park, and to support that effort, we will also not be mowing most of that park to enable this study to happen. And then finally, just a reminder to the community that the City Hall 180 Market Street grand opening, City Hall and Library, will take place on July 23rd at 4:30, and we certainly hope as many community members can come out to that event as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that I did go to the first Sobu night for the season, and I left as the rain started trickling. I can't even remember if it got hard or not, but there were an enormous number of people there. So it was nice. I think people were really excited to once again be able to gather outside in public with their friends and neighbors and enjoy the music and that beautiful area.
And it's every Thursday through August, right?
Correct. That's my understanding. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Let's move on to item 5, the consent agenda. There's quite a few items. We have the disbursements. Consider and possibly approve an application for Better Building Communities grant from the city clerk, authorizing the city to award public works engineering service contracts in the 8 categories outlined to qualified consultants. Appoint Councilor Tim Barrett to the Queen City Park Road Bike Ped Scoping Study Advisory Committee. Approve a resolution honoring the service of Tom Hubbard and naming the park at Spear Street and Nolan Farm Road, the Thomas H. Hubbard Recreation and Natural Area. We kind of did that last week, but we didn't quite have a quorum until we were partway through, so this makes it more official. And lastly, approve and accept the coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund certification, including the appointing of Jessie Baker as the authorized representative and, Martha Mayshard as the contact person. So do I have a motion to approve those, 2, 4, 6 items?
I move to approve, and I have one question.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, what is your further discussion, Megan?
Yes, for under Ingalls, there's a reimbursement to Ray Ingalls, and it doesn't specify for what, for the disbursements.
Oh, so this would be for Andrew.
Megan, I don't have the invoice right in front of me, but would be happy to get back to you in other business.
That's fine, and I'm sorry for, I was stuck without Wi-Fi for a portion this afternoon, so I apologize.
Well, next time go to one of the parks and start painting or something.
That's right.
Do they have Wi-Fi there?
Right, I don't know. So if there's no further discussion, are you ready for the question? Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda with the 6 items, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? So that's 4-0 with 1 absent. So that carries. Moving on to item 6. This is a discussion and consideration of the Planning Commission's guidance for the land use intentions in the Southeast Quadrant. And Paul Connor, welcome, Paul. How's that little baby doing?
He's doing great, 10 weeks and growing. So,
Oh, good.
I'm here tonight, and Jessica Luisos, Chair of the Planning Commission, is here, and I believe there might be a couple of other commissioners who are also here this evening. As sort of an update, discussion, and council feedback on the subject of land use and development and open space. So if you recall, back in April, the Planning Commission had provided you'd had a joint meeting with them and talked about a number of issues, and afterwards the commission provided an update letter about where things were with the environmental protection standards, and also had posed some questions about where the council might be thinking about some areas specifically in the southeast quadrant. Commission has had several, they had their public hearing on the environmental protection standards back in May, and have had a few meetings since that time to work through the 100+ comments that they'd received. They received a fair amount of feedback on various subjects related to different kinds of open space, be it grasslands or agricultural soils or the habitat blocks or other. The commission worked through individual pieces of that, and then over the last couple of meetings had a discussion that was sort of taking a half step back to discuss land use overall rather than being focused on individual resources. And so the chair and staff put together a map that was in your packet showing 8 areas of the southeast quadrant, and these areas highlight portions of the city, of the southeast quadrant specifically, that are neither in the current natural resource protection zoning district, are not already built, so they're not already neighborhoods, at least at a large scale, are not in the current water quality protection standards of wetlands and stream setbacks, and are not in the draft ones that were reviewed by the Planning Commission at their hearing, specifically habitat blocks and steep slopes. So after you take out all those areas, that which remains is what the term that we've been using is the word buildable, meaning it could be a future neighborhood. So as taking a half step back, we asked the commission to take a look at 8 areas that contain buildable land, and said, commissioners, given all of the work that you've been doing the last few years, given the council's adoption of interim zoning, what do you want to see happen in these quote unquote buildable areas? And we posed 3 questions. We gave everybody a little survey to think about, and then use as a dialogue point for, do you want to see these areas individually or collectively built as neighborhoods with the requisite park space and housing and various things like that? Do you want to see neighborhoods and accommodation of additional open space that is not otherwise regulated? Or do you want to see these areas be principally open space for the foreseeable future? So with zoning and or other tools that would see those areas not built as neighborhoods for the foreseeable future. Commission had a dialogue on it, looking at these 8 areas, and what was in your packet is the guidance that they've given to us, and we're giving to you to see, how well does this align with what your thinking has been over these past couple of years of interim zoning and beyond that. So that's my opening spiel. I will report that this was a robust discussion. The commission was not unanimous. There were commissioners who felt that was, it on both ends of it. But everything that's in here represents a majority of what the commission's opinion was.
Okay, Michael has his hand up, but I would like to first just ask if Jessica Luisos, as chair of the Planning Commission, would like to add any additional comments, and then we can take comments.
Sure. So I guess, we've been very focused on the environmental protection piece of our task, but you've also tasked us with the overhaul of our PUD process, or part of the land development regulations as well. So, this discussion is part of what we had brought to you at our last joint meeting, that we were interested in some feedback on, where the different PUD tools that we were describing to you might make sense. And if that was really the shared vision that you had as well. So, I know at the time that you had said you weren't really ready to comment on some of these areas in the PUD feedback at that time. So I think we had this initial discussion, and as Paul said, I think that there were commissioners on both ends of the spectrum, and the guidance that you have in there is kind of the result of our conversation. But what we haven't done is work with staff on exactly what this means for specific tools. So this is kind of a general overview of our discussion and kind of general kind of direction in these areas.
Okay.
And Chair Riley, if at any point you'd like to see this in a map, I'm happy to pull it up, but I'm also aware that as soon as I pull it up, it gets harder to see everybody's face. So just
Right.
let me know if and when you'd like to do that.
Okay. Do people want to see a map now or not? Well, Tim, you would like to see the map? Okay. And Michael, what you want to put the map up, Paul? And then Chris Tremblay said he wanted to make a comment, and Michael Mittag has had his hand up. So why don't we go to Chris first?
Okay. All right. Everyone can hear me okay, I assume. Thank you. Good evening. So I'm speaking as a resident and as an individual. Just when we're thinking about housing and environmental protections, I come back to the question of what kind of community do we want to live in? And for me, it's one that provides an opportunity for all to succeed, while maintaining our Vermont values. The neighborhoods along Heinsberg Road, Dorset Street, and Spear Street offer those opportunities to preserve our natural resources for all to access and enjoy while making a meaningful impact in housing affordability. And here's some 5 real examples of how the affordable housing crisis directly impacts people that I know and love today. My sister, who lives in emergency housing while she waits for Section 8 housing, she'd like to live in Chittenden or Racine County and be closer to her support network. She currently lives an hour away from her guardian. My brother and his family, who just bought their first home, a real fixer-upper, but it's 45 minutes away from their jobs in South Burlington, right on Heinsberg Road. And it's more times on the road, and it's not time spent with their family. And an electric car just isn't an affordable option. It's my brother, who lives with his family while he pays down his student loans, commutes 45 minutes again to his job in South Burlington. Renting and saving for a down payment on a home while paying down student loans just isn't an option. And then my sister, who graduated magna cum laude from Champlain College and moved out of state for a job that paid about the same, but housing was far more affordable. I asked the city council give direction to the planning commission for housing the SEQ to stick to the Arrowhead report that defines the map as relies on the science and not the subjective opinion of wealthy, not my backyard neighbors, who advocacy could make the SEQ more unaffordable and an exclusionary area to live. Prioritize those scarce building lots as defined in the case for housing, produced by the Affordable Housing Committee, who reports to the City Council. And then just lastly, fully endorse the expansion of inclusionary zoning citywide to produce more affordable homes at no extra cost to taxpayers and would be built by home builders instead of using city resources. You have a unique opportunity to make a positive impact on Vermonters and future Vermonters by supporting housing affordability while preserving our natural resources that we highly value as a community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Megan did make a good comment. This is a council planning commission conversation, but I do have Michael Mittag is next up, and he's a planning commission member. And I just want to remind people, this isn't a public hearing, but we did get a letter. We got 2 letters from the public late this afternoon. So why don't we go to Michael Mittag next?
Thank you, Helen. I just wanted to confirm what Jessica said, that there was by no means any unanimity on the questions that you have been asked to comment on tonight. And my personal view is that for the Planning Commission to try to decide where and what kind of housing to build anywhere in the city, in the context of the environmental protection standards, doesn't make any sense. We all did the homework that we were requested to do because the Planning Commission's work has to continue. But in my view, doing this work in the context of environmental protection standards is wrong. The work that we should be doing is environmental protection, not deciding where and what housing we should build on lots which are not otherwise protected and could be built upon. It's not the Planning Commission's definition. The word buildable came from somewhere else, possibly staff, but that's not a definition that we've used. And I think what we're doing flies in the face of what the city is trying to do, and what the community is trying to do, and what the state is trying to do, and what the country is trying to do to mitigate climate change. Having decisions made or recommendations made by the Planning Commission under the environmental protection standards doesn't make any sense, and it shouldn't make any sense to councillors either. I'll have more to say later.
Okay. Jessica, did you want to respond?
I guess just in the, we've been so focused on the environmental protection standards piece of the task that we've been given by you. We're now trying to transition to also talk about the other tasks that we've been tasked by you, which is the revision of the PUD work and the subdivision and master planning standards. So, I think inevitably there's a push and pull between environmental protection and building. And, this is a conversation about how kind of both of those fit within our city. So, I think there is a conversation to be had, and the question that we've been grappling with is, okay, we've been talking about environmental protection. Where's the other side of the coin of where might be reasonable to prioritize for development, which also is part of our city goals. So, I think that's where this conversation starts to come in for you. And maybe, I don't know if I said that very articulately, but maybe.
I'd love to jump in.
I think Megan?
Yeah, thank you. I would just respond that this map very closely resembles the parcels that the Open Space IZ Committee identified, and that we had Earth Economics do an economic study on, and that both of those pieces were to be provided as direction to the Planning Commission. And so what I would hope that the Planning Commission would take from those 2 studies is that the parcels that were identified as important to the ecosystem that comes from Shelburne Pond all the way up through the southeast quadrant, up past the actual northwest corner of the southeast quadrant to the Potash Brook, goes all the way to Red Rocks and then into the lake, that is a very precious ecosystem. And that is something that the IZ Open Space Committee identified. It is also something that our Earth Economics reports on in terms of the value to us. Over 20 years, millions and millions, I would say over $200 million that those 20 parcels represent to us over 20 years, over $200 million. And I think that that is the direction that the Planning Commission needs to hear from the council. This was part of interim zoning. I would say that in order to heed that direction from the council, which came through studies, it was not arbitrary. It was not the five of us meeting in a coffee shop. We had people and citizens vet this. We had public meetings. We had professionals that Jessica actually pointed out to us from Portland, Oregon, do a study of these 20 parcels. And so if there is going to be a PUD, it should be one that limits the amount of impervious surface to the greatest degree, the one that creates the largest buffer possible between those important natural resources and the buildable impervious area. And I think that it's clear, and I'm sorry that it's been difficult for the Planning Commission to see those studies or to read them or to follow them. But I think it's very clear the direction that this council has provided. Again, not arbitrarily, not the five of us meeting and determining from our own, heads. This was done through a thorough public process, as well as through expert advice. And we have dollar figures attached. And so this represents tangible benefits to our city. And I think that the dense neighborhoods that commissioners have recommended is out of sync with what this council has provided to you through all of this public process and the extensive research done by Earth Economics. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Other comments from the council? Tim?
I have some questions.
Okay, questions are good too.
Yeah. So Paul, can you help walk me through some of these areas so that if some people don't understand where they are, they could visualize in their mind, looking at this map?
Yes, I'm happy to, Tim. Go ahead.
So number one, up right-hand corner would be the southern edge of Butler Farms, right? And Heinsberg Road. And it's that white block of area is probably just north of Claire Solar, which is the green block between 1 and 2. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And so is it helpful, Councilor Barrett, to highlight what the commission's recommendations were in these areas, or do you just want to point out where? Do you want to just orient at this point?
I just want to orient first, and then you can go back and
sure.
and do your suggestion. Yeah. And then 2 is the orange area to the left of 2. Is that Cider Mill 2?
That is correct. So the Cider Mill 2 is not yet built, but it's fully approved. And so for the purposes of the Planning Commission, it was shown as being a neighborhood. So the southern end of that, the light green, is essentially the to be determined final boundary, but that's the Eau Claire parcel that the city and the Vermont Land Trust have been working to conserve.
Okay.
And the northern boundary is the Claire Solar of that one.
Okay. And then circle number 3, is that mostly Dorset Heights Road, east and west?
That's correct. It's mostly Dorset Heights Road. The parcels on the west side also touch all the way over to Dorset Street.
Oh, okay. Right. And those are all single family homes at this time, right?
Yes, except at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you see a little subdivision.
Yes.
Link Road and Goldenrod that has some single families and duplexes on it, but the rest are single families.
And are those 10 acres where they're full lots?
Generally, yes. There's a couple of 5-acre lots in there also, but the ones that stretch, I'm going to draw out a 10-acre stretch. So that's a 10-acre piece that should be showing up momentarily on your screen.
Okay.
It is.
Yep. I see it. Yep.
And then there's some smaller ones that are 5 acres, like, for example, that's 5 acres. That's 5 acres there.
Okay. And then looking at number 5, that's centered mostly on the Cider Mill Market and Deli, right?
That's correct. Yeah. That's the orange spot right in the middle here that I'm putting the X over.
Okay. And then 4 is a block of properties that are to the west of Dorset Street and probably bounded to the north by Nolan Farm Road.
Yes, so on the west side of that is the green blob. That's the Great Swamp. The north end of that is essentially Nolan Farm Road. The south end of it is the Dorset Farms neighborhood. And the east side where you see that blue, that's where there's a stream and 500-year floodplain going through. Some of those properties extend all the way over to Dorset Street, but not all of them.
So the parcel just north of the number 4, which borders Nolan Farm Road, was recently purchased by a private individual from a developer, right?
Yes, that's.
Okay.
I don't know if it's an individual or an entity, but yes, it was acquired.
Okay, whatever, yeah. And then 6 is south of Cider Mill on Dorset Street, and those are lots that are on east and west side. I see, okay. And the Scott property is to the southwest of this number 6 bubble, is that true?
I'm gonna highlight the Scott property. This is the city-owned Scott property here that I just
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 7 is, I'm confused on 7. Is that on Spear Street?
It is essentially the long property that is located between South Village and South Point on Spear Street.
Got it. Okay, great. All right, that.
And then,
thank you very much. I hope that was helpful for other people. It was. Oh, and I forgot.
There's also 8.
8 is at the very top.
Yeah.
It's the corner of Spear and Swift, and similar to Cider Mill 2, the orange blob that you see right under the number 8. That is that's the Spear Meadows neighborhood that has been fully approved.
Right. And to the north and inside the black lines would be UVM property, right?
That's correct. There's a UVM-owned parcel that's zoned residential there.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Would you
Go ahead
tell-
with you. Go ahead.
Would you just describe number 4 again, please?
Sure. Number 4 generally represents the parcels that are south of Nolan Farm Road
Okay.
and north of Dorset Farms. So there's four or five parcels right in there. The red circle more or less shows the area between the Great Swamp on the west, the left side of the screen, and on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a stream, wetland, and 500-year floodplain. Some of those parcels go all the way to Dorset Street, but others don't.
Thank you.
Sure.
And now are you going to tell us what the Planning Commission came up with in their...
Helen, if it's okay, before we get there, I just have 3 quick
Oh,
clarifying
yeah,
questions.
sorry, Matt. Sorry.
That's all right. Paul, I understand that the 8 sites all have the 3 criteria that you listed. Are there other sites or other parcels, either in the SEQ or in the city, that also fit those 3 criteria? Meaning that they're not currently protected under certain standards and they're not projected to under the draft regulations, and there's nothing currently buildable as it were.
Yes, there are a number of parcels that are buildable around the city. The commission's focus was really here, largely because there had been some discussion around the comprehensive plan and grasslands and agricultural soils. There may yet be further discussion on other parcels, but as a general answer to your question, yes, there are others.
Great. And 2 more quick clarifying questions. The second is, of these 8 parcels, did you investigate, are you aware of covenants that are on the land that would restrict development, or conversely, if there's any projects that are either at sketch plan or may be introduced as developable projects that you are considering at the administrative level?
Ellen, it is 7:30. Just wanted everybody to know it's 7:30 for the hearing.
Oh, that's right. Well, that should be, the public hearing is probably pretty short. So, and we
Helen?
also have our special guest. Yes, Jessie?
My reading is as long as the public hearing starts after 7:30, after the warn time, you can push it back a little. So if you wanted to pause this conversation go to the special guest, come back to the public hearing, and then return to this discussion, you could.
Okay, is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to welcome so thank you, Paul, and
We'll continue in a bit.
Okay, thank you. I would like to welcome a former governor, Madeline Kunin, to this very important first meeting of the first female city manager for the city of South Burlington. You know what it's like to break that glass ceiling because you did it yourself. And I know you have a connection with Jessie, so we invited you to maybe make a few observations. Before you do that, I just want to say I love your book of poetry. I encourage everyone on the call to purchase one. It was just fabulous, and I've shared it with some friends, and they've all agreed with me. It was particularly nice to me because I knew John, and we're of sort of similar age. So it was really a masterpiece. Thank you. But that is why you came.
Thank you for inviting me to pop in on your meeting, and I don't want to take too much time to take you away from your important civic work. But Megan invited me and told me about Jessie, and that she was the first woman to be a city manager, and that her mother, I knew her mother, who worked in the legislature at the Legislative Council, where she helped draft bills. And it also turns out, and this is really interesting timing, that when I knew her, she was pregnant with, was it with Megan or with Jessie? She was pregnant with Jessie. And look where Jessie is now. And that I, at the time, encouraged her and admired her for working and drafting bills and being pregnant and not letting anything stop her. So Jessie, if you're hearing me, I congratulate you, and you bring back fond memories of your mother and that whole period of my life. And South Burlington has had really good representation, and you're working hard on further changes and a growing community. So the hardest work is still local politics. I think it's harder than being in Congress in some ways, because all your neighbors know all the right answers to all the questions that you're struggling with. And potholes still need to be fixed, and traffic needs to be figured out. So it's really where people live and where they're most concerned. Megan asked if I would read one poem. So it was hard to choose, but I decided to read a poem that I wrote during the height of the pandemic, when I felt I was too limited. We had to be very careful. We couldn't socialize. And it was one of those darker days of the pandemic. And then I went outside for a walk and was just struck by the beauty of the day and the blue sky. So this is called Blue Sky. And I don't have the right pair of glasses, but I'll do my best. So it's called Blue Sky. I have time, a bushelful, no, a truckload, a storage unit full of time. Still, I portion time out carefully, almost like in the old days, except now I stretch my neck and raise my head and keep it there until it hurts to look at the blue sky. Long ago, before coronavirus, I looked at the sky for weather, or at night for stars. The blue sky gave me answers by the hour. I didn't even say thank you. Yesterday, I went for a walk and gazed upward, expecting little. I looked up at the blue sky. The longer I looked, I saw more layers of blue. The blue sky had depth, a clean teacup of blue without a crack. I could see through one blue to find another blue. The longer I held my head up, blue became more blue until I continued my walk and thanked the sky for being blue. And thank you for listening.
Thank
Sorry
you.
I can't be there in person, but have a good rest of the meeting and have a wonderful new adventure with your new city planner, city person, and keep on doing the right things for your public, for your constituents. And thank you so much for including me tonight.
Well, thank you. Jessie, do you want to?
Sure. Governor, thank you so much for being here. And you're right, nothing has ever stopped my mom. She's on the phone right now, actually listening to you. And I aspire to live up to her strength every day. Growing up and watching you lead our state and watching a woman be able to hold that position definitely influenced my leadership and who I am. And I will work very hard to live up to your reputation as well. And I hope that there are young people watching the city of South Burlington and watching what the leaders in South Burlington are doing over the weeks and months and decades to come and see themselves in these positions of leadership as well. So thank you, Governor, for being here and your very kind words. And I agree with Helen, your poetry, your book of poetry is just exquisite. Thank you.
Thank you so much and good luck. And I know you'll do a great job.
Great. Thank you very much, Governor Kunin. Okay.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it's been our honor. Thanks. So
Thanks.
we will move on quickly then to item 7, the public hearing on the proposed ordinance regulating the use of public and private sanitary sewage and stormwater systems and the stormwater upgrade feasibility analysis. That's quite a transition of topics, huh? So David Wheeler, the stormwater superintendent, is David here?
Yep.
There's so many little names. Have you shown, are you, oh, there's
He's
Tom.
here in the room with us.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
Yeah, so
So we went through this 2 weeks ago. Are there any, do you want to make some opening comments or should I just open it to public comment?
Helen, one item, can you have Dave Wheeler totally exactly identify himself because it just says City of South Burlington, and
Okay.
I know you alluded to the fact that that was him, but I'd just rather have him say it.
Yeah, he's pretty small. So Dave, why don't you identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, Dave Wheeler, City of South Burlington Stormwater Superintendent.
Okay. And Tom DiPietro, are you going to be speaking or you just back up?
I'm just back up tonight, but Tom DiPietro, City of South Burlington, Deputy Director of Environmental Services over at Public Works.
Great. Okay. So are there some opening comments or do you want to just go right to, this is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the public who wishes to make a comment, we have a Molly with her phone on. Does that mean you wanted to speak to this issue, Molly? Or is that just what happens when you're a caller? I don't know. Are there any public comments?
I dialed in, so I had no comments from me. No comments from Molly. That's just me dialing in. Why it shows me as not muted.
All right. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Are there any
problem.
Roseanne?
I don't have a comment. I have a question. And I'm sorry, I haven't followed this issue. Is there going to be some sort of overview of what you want us to comment on? Or were we supposed to read something first?
Well, the whole proposal was in the packet. it's a
Is there
lot
a
to
reason-
read.
Is there-
David, maybe you can just highlight, a lot of it is, as I understand it, is really just correcting things and bringing it up to speed. And there's only, I think, 2 areas that are of significant change. Is that right?
A very quick overview. So basically, the state has finalized their state stormwater general permit. That was December 1st, 2020. And so we just want to bring our ordinance. We have 2 ordinances addressing stormwater. We have the ordinance regulating the use of public and private sanitary, sewer, and stormwater systems, and we have the city ordinance stormwater upgrade feasibility analysis. So we want to update some deadlines that we had established, so that way they're consistent with the state deadlines now. We also want to update their state tiered structure for stormwater treatment practice selection that the state has adopted, and we want to have ours be in line with that. We have some various punctuation and et cetera items. We've also included a formalized cost sharing policy, so the way that we split cost sharing with neighborhoods in the city. And then we want to formalize the practice of all property owners going through a SUPA process. That's our stormwater upgrade feasibility analysis. Just for consistency, there was some language included in the other ordinance previously. We just kind of want to shift the process under one document. And then we've also tweaked the stormwater mitigation fee structure to incentivize folks to implement stormwater treatment on their site rather than just pay a fee to get out of that.
Okay, that was a good synopsis. Are there any comments or questions by councilors? Well, they would entertain a motion to, oh, Roseanne?
Cute. And now that was a summary. Just a quick question. You're saying you are aligning our regs with the state regs. Is doing that making it more environmentally responsible or less? I mean, are our regs more environmentally friendly or the states? And so we're going to increase our, sorry, this is my curtain blowing from the wind. Will that make us more environmentally responsible regarding stormwater and this issue?
Yeah, so one of the items was just construction deadlines, so that really doesn't have an impact. It's just when things need to get done by. We want to have one consistent deadline versus 2 different ones. The other item, we were actually more strict than the state previously, and then they brought their standards up to a similar standard than as us, but they just had a slightly different layout. And I would argue that theirs is probably better than ours had been. It's how you select the type of stormwater practice on site. And so they've prioritized infiltration as the #1, which gets the greatest pollutant reduction, and then moving on to tier 2 and tier 3. So we're just being consistent with that. And I think if anything, we're strengthening our regulations and not doing it the opposite way.
Thank you.
Tim Barrett.
Yeah, can you, I don't want to drag this out, but can you and Tom kind of bring us up to speed on the homeowners associations in South Burlington, and just roughly, how many of the associations are in compliance and are validated under the MS4 permit with the state, and how many aren't, and is there a timeline to get everybody caught up? And
yeah, so really, more or less under the state's permit, their 9050 permit, each of those HOAs that has an expired permit, they also have a deadline, and the state established that deadline. And so we're just deferring to the state's deadlines. And it all depends on where you're located within the city, which stormwater impaired watershed you're in, or if you're outside of stormwater impaired watershed. But I mean, that's all spelled out. I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me. I don't know if that helps at all.
Well, so the question is, so as the state starts tightening the regulations more and more over the next maybe 50 years, right? For those HOAs that have have worked a deal with the Stormwater Division and conveyed, you know, their catchment systems to the city. As those regulations become tighter, will those HOAs have to share in the cost for changes that need to be made to those now city stormwater ponds?
Yeah, so there's, I think, two things to address that. One is we adopt them for a 20-year period. So if something significant happened during that 20-year period, we wouldn't necessarily have to renew that. You know, I think the intention is if everything stays the course, we would just, you know, have them reapply and we, you know, continue to maintain their system. But we do have language that if the city or the state were to roll out some greater standards that we have to meet, that they would be on the hook for cost sharing in that.
That leads me to a question.
Is that all you have, Tim?
Yeah, you know, I might contact Dave separately later on just for some more information. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Megan?
Thank you, Helen. I was curious to know how long does it take, let's say that there is a change in the, you know, climate that changes our weather systems and patterns to the point where the current regulations and systems are no longer operable. How long would it take to react to, are we based on, you know, the tropical storm Irene currently? Are we based on foreseen conditions?
So there's different requirements at different levels of storms. We only treat for pollutants up to like the 1-inch storm event, that's the water quality storm. And then there's this channel protection storm, which is essentially 2 inches of rainfall within a 24-hour period. And, you know, there's studies showing that that does the most significant amount of erosion over time to stream banks. And then you have things like the 100-year storm, where you just have to safely convey that storm to ensure that your stormwater treatment practice doesn't, you know, completely wash out. And the city actually, in our LDRs, we have a requirement for being able to convey the 25-year storm currently. So for any new development that comes through, they have to have pipes in place that can convey the 25-year storm safely. But it doesn't necessarily make sense to remove pollutants from a 25-year storm, as the majority are in that first flush within like the first 1 inch. So they have EMP performance curves, and the greater size storm you design for, you know, the less bang for the buck you get in terms of pollutant removal, because again, most of that pollution concentration is in the beginning of the storm when it first washes off.
Right, but if we're looking at the fact that 100-year storms are now going to be our 25-year storms, and we look at what happened with Katrina, right, where we had petroleum products, we had, you know, the amount of pollution was just, the system in place could not mitigate it, right? So if we had to plan for Katrina, let's just say that, right? Or for Tropical Storm Irene on a 25-year basis, are we ready?
So for like a Katrina style events where, I mean, you have potentially whole neighborhoods submerged, you know, at that point, the stormwater conveyance systems, the catch basins and pipes are no longer what's conveying the storm. It's completely the topography of the land. So at that point, everything changes. And then you're into more kind of industrial permits where ensuring that, you know, tanks of petroleum products are properly stored and things like that. So
right, and there are other toxins as well, right, that could easily be washed into that major rush of water. And so this does not necessarily address that. That would be addressed by different planning tools.
So Tom, the setup is kind of hard because you can't see Tom. So Tom, I see you trying to raise your hand as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, so we're getting some like the technical standards of stormwater treatment system design. And to Tim's question, we'd love to come back sometime and get into where the state permit stuff stands. I think if folks want to hear it, we'd be happy to tell that story because it's very interesting what we've been doing over the years. But to get to Megan's specific question, baked into the technical standards, Megan, is the storm, as the storms changed, kind of the average storm changes with that 25 or 10 year. So it does get changing it updated. It's not just set at 2 inches. You know, it goes back and looks at a 20-year record. And if it changes over that record, then the storm size will increase. How
often is it changed, Tom?
The state switched from doing it on their own to using an NOAA Atlas. So I think that's updated like annually, but I can look at that. It's much more often than it used to be.
Okay, just speaking as someone who lives in the DNL, the day-night line for the F-35s do not accurately represent the 118 decibels, right? So the 20-year span might not be the measure that we should be using right now. I just wanted to put that out there. And I think that, you know, I'm ready to pass this, but I think that we all would be wise to know that this is not adequate. I think, in my view anyway, for what could come.
Michael Mitek and then Sarah Dupp.
Yeah, I wasn't able to hear exactly what David said in response to Tim's questions, but maybe I have a different question, and that is: are there many homeowners associations or other areas of the city that are currently out of compliance or not yet in compliance, and therefore their discharges are polluting the lake? Maybe Tom could answer that, because I couldn't hear David's the audio from where he is not very good.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on that one as well. So there are a number of neighborhoods who haven't brought their systems up to current standards or compliance, right? So they're not providing the kind of treatment that newer systems are. And so part of the ordinance is doing, right, is trying to, there's two pathways people in South Burlington can get into compliance. They can come under our MS4 or they can get a permit from the state. And so we're just kind of aligning those things in the ordinance. But there is more work to be done. Yes.
Okay, Sarah Dupp.
Yeah, thanks. First, just a question. I too was not following this issue for this meeting. I apologize, but does this have anything to do with sewer treatment as well, or are you talking purely stormwater here?
Yeah, just stormwater. The city has
Okay.
a separate, so we don't have
Okay. Okay, I won't belabor it then, but some of us had occasion to be looking at the sewer ordinance not too long ago, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And just as a piece of writing, I thought if you were recrafting some of the wording, this might be timely, but it doesn't apply. But the wording of that ordinance seemed to be largely just a procedural list of how to apply for a permit. And, you know, just as a piece of prose, it didn't have any introduction or purpose statement or anything like that that would sort of set the scene for the ordinance. And so I was going to throw that in, but I can't speak to the stormwater aspect, only the sewer one. So for what that's worth.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Roseanne?
Yeah, sorry to belabor this, but if I'm understanding what Megan was trying to get at, is that these ordinances were written before we are seeing dramatic impacts from the climate crisis. So what may have been what happened in previous decades is not what's happening now. I mean, look at Irene. I mean, that caught so much of Vermont off guard. So, and I think maybe Michael was getting at this. Are we prepared? Does this ordinance and does that prepare us for likely events that science says is coming our way? And the more, and we have so much more impervious surface that has to affect the stormwater and the capacity in normal times. So it's a general question, but boy, if we're doing something, now's the time we ought to, you know, make sure we're prepared to handle the, you know, the dramatic climate impacts that they say are coming.
a question of resilience.
Yeah, so I mean, let's break that into, you know, we have the neighborhoods with their stormwater treatment system in place, then they discharge to a stream. Then we have culverts in those streams or bridges. It's almost, you know, what you're just talking about is more a matter of, are the bridges and culverts adequately sized, which is kind of outside the scope of what this ordinance addresses, where, you know, folks are getting the required pollutant reduction, and then the city's willing to maintain those systems. So I kind of see those as two slightly separate issues.
So David, in the future, is that something that you think, or Tom, would be appropriate to really look at for our ordinances, to really think of it in terms of some of the climate changes and our resilience and preparedness?
I'll on that one. So we've done a number of things to prepare for these storms that everybody's describing, right? We've increased our minimum culvert sizing. We're sizing sizing culverts and pipes in the road larger than we used to. We're doing detention. We're looking at floodplain storage. So we are being pretty proactive. But kind of, I think what we're talking about in the ordinance here is helping people get those permits, right? So they don't have those expired permits that are going to cause trouble during real estate transactions, so that they are upgraded to provide appropriate treatment, like Mr. Metag mentioned. I'm happy to talk about kind of the extreme storm event thing and areas of risk and things like that, because I know we've done some of that as well with Paul and planning and zoning and our hazard mitigation plans and things like that as well.
And one good example, when Market Street was being redone, we replaced the culvert that went underneath Market Street. We made it a large box culvert because we saw the opportunity that we were totally redoing Market Street, and the best time to replace the culvert was before that road project happened.
Right, we certainly put in the stormwater stuff for the school, as well as the 180 Market Street. That was definitely an upgrade in terms of the environment.
Right, but when we see the building collapse in Miami because of the water under the pool, I mean, we don't know the exact specifics of it, but we have to be very aware that we could be seeing dramatic changes. And I certainly, you know, knock on wood, we will not see that in South Burlington. So it's not, you know, I am concerned that we are not prepared for what is to come, and I'm concerned by the slowness in adapting. Yeah, so.
Although that is probably a separate issue than these ordinance updates.
Except I hear from these updates that we're not ready for what's to come, but it's an update. So I will pass it, but it's hopefully going to be followed by an update with regard to 100-year storms happening every 20 years.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions from the public or the council? So I would enter, Matt.
I would move that the amendments to the ordinance regulating the use of public and private sanitary sewage and stormwater systems and stormwater upgrade feasibility analysis be approved.
Second.
Second, Tim Barrett seconded. Are there any other questions? Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So the motion carries 4-0 with one absent. Thank you very much, Tom and David.
Thank you.
And now let's go back to Planning Commission guidance, item 6. And I think Paul Connor was about to share with us what the Planning Commission is recommending for changes to the environmental conservation rules related to these 8 areas.
That's right. I was in the midst of, I think, answering a couple of questions of Councilor Coda's first and then getting there.
Okay, yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
You had asked about whether there were any private easements that were part of the discussion. So the commission did talk about that a little bit. I will note that private easements are, you know, they're outside, they're private, they're outside of our regulatory tool. That said, the commission was aware that along Dorset Heights, it's our understanding that there's an agreement among, I believe, 7 of the homeowners there that 4 or 5 of them must agree in order to have additional development take place amongst any of their properties. And on the property in area number 4, south of Dorset, south of Nolan Farm Road, the properties that were at one point under consideration for being Dorset Meadows, our understanding is that there's a covenant that restricts the 2 northerly properties that you see in a number 4 to no more than 9 homes each. Again, the commission is aware of these, but it's not the guiding, it's a separate level of legal entity. The one other thing that I will say that the commission sort of took note of was the existence of infrastructure and where the limitations of infrastructure are in the southeast quadrant specific to, I'm thinking specifically of water line and water pressure stuff. So I think you might have had a second question for me also.
The last thing, and I think it is helpful for you to go through the recommendations and for us to ask questions if we have time and if the chair allows. But the conclusion after you go through the recommendations is that the Planning Commission could look at regulatory tools. Is there certain regulatory tools that are contemplated? And as the Planning Commission spent time thinking about the different design of those tools or tools that you already have, what are they?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So yes, the context of this discussion is largely what should the regulatory environment look like? And I think that's an important point that I wanted to hit. So thank you for asking the question. That there are a number of recommendations that have been made to the City Council, to the Planning Commission, that can look at the other tools and powers of the city, including acquiring land or conserving land, as you have done with what is now the Thomas H. Hubbard Park, for instance, or the Eau Claire arrangement. But this is really about regulatory tools. The tools that the commission, so this conversation, we asked the commission to take a step back from individual tools because it's very easy to get sort of stuck into the, what if we tweak the tool this way or that way? But the tools under consideration largely are the current tools, which are the Natural Resource Protection District. The boundaries of that could be moved. The underlying zoning districts could be adjusted, and allowances for TDRs to be used or not used could be adjusted within our existing tools. And of course, the work that the Commission's been doing both on the environmental protection standards, which has focused on specific natural resources like habitat blocks, floodplains, wetlands, things like that. And lastly, the use of the tools that have been developed under the PUD work as part of interim zoning, including neighborhoods and potentially conservation plan unit developments, and how one or both of those tools could be applicable in the right place. But again, we asked the commission to take a half step back because it's very easy to get lost in a tool when the big picture question for the council, for the commission, and our read from the staff end of, a part of why you adopted interim zoning was to take a holistic look, take a step back and say, what's the regulatory environment, big picture that you want to create to foster neighborhoods or additional open spaces through a regulatory tool.
Matt?
Thank you for that, Paul. That was really helpful. I guess I should ask the point directly, which is, you're considering different PUDs, conservation PUD and traditional neighborhood design. Would that be considered under this discussion as a regulatory tool, for instance, in one area, saying that this is absolutely a conservation PUD, not a traditional neighborhood design, or vice versa? Would that be a tool that you would consider?
Yeah, so that could be a tool. Yes, that's a perfect example of a tool. I would say another tool could be if the city is very clear that a certain area should not be a neighborhood and it knows the geography of that. The conservation PUD allows for the conservation to be identified at the time of development review. The tool that the city in the past of the natural resource protection is one in which the city identifies up front, here's the areas where we want to see open space long-term, and here's the areas we want to see neighborhoods. So that tool could also accomplish it if the city is ready to say, yes, we know in this area that we want to have conservation as just a straight geography rather than having it be assessed through the development review process. And that's why we wanted to take a step back. There's been a lot of feedback, a lot of discussion in front of you, amongst you, at the Planning Commission level of what do you want to be achieving through the end of interim zoning. And so this is sort of a gut check, frankly, of the areas currently showing white would be under the current regulations and under the proposed PUDs and environmental protection standards that were warned for public hearing a month ago. These would all be able to be neighborhoods. That's where the current draft is. And so this is really is this the direction that you want to be going? The commission reviewed that, and I'll go through what their recommendations were in a moment.
I very much appreciate you phrasing that as a question, Paul, because I believe that that was how I understood this agenda item to be, and not recommendations that we received from the Planning Commission, but rather what direction is the council wishing to provide to the Planning Commission. You and Helen and I sat in with Jessie, had a conversation about this agenda item, and that is how I understood it. And I think that, and I'll repeat it because you asked the question, we have received the open space report. We have approved it. We received the Earth Economics report. We endorsed it. We have provided that to the Planning Commission to use in order for them to know which parcels we wish to be prioritized for conservation, and for there to be perhaps the conservation PUDs or other solutions that are outside of the regulatory environment to be used in order to conserve that land as much as possible. Nothing, right, is absolute here. We're operating in an uncertain world, but I do believe that we have provided that. We provided it over a year ago. I hope that it is clear, and I would hope that the Planning Commission and perhaps Jessica, if she has questions, or other commissioners could ask questions about those reports. What isn't clear about those reports? Why are we seeing dense neighborhoods being recommended by commissioners on areas where the two reports approved by the council we have identified for top conservation, and we furthermore have a dollar sign attached to that conservation area for what it brings to our community?
I would just like to, Helen, if it's all right, just respond to that directly. I wasn't on the council and did not approve those reports.
Correct.
I want to make that clear.
Helen, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I muted it because the dog was wandering around. Matt, if you would like to respond, you may, and then I know Paul and Jessica wanted to say something as well.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't on the council. I was elected this March. So, you know, I may have a different opinion than the prior council's opinion, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that we don't speak for each other. We speak as individual councilors. So, and I can reserve my comments for the end after I hear more.
Okay, thank you. Paul, and then Jessica.
Maybe if Councilor Ridley, maybe have Jessica speak first, and then I'll
Okay,
speak.
Jessica.
She's chair.
I see you, Michael, but I want to get some other people in.
Yeah, so I appreciate what you actually both said, and that is the case, that we are interested in council feedback. You know, I do think that some of the reports You also commissioned an economic report as well that looked at, kind of gave some direction that in areas where we are going to see development, it should be done in a smart way where it's compact. I think we got some initial feedback at our joint meeting from you that
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? Was that done by, I'm trying to recall the name.
John Stewart, I think.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know that we approved or endorsed that, Jessica. He gave it to us, but we did not approve or endorse that report by John Stewart.
But we
Not
did
endorse it.
receive it though.
Yeah.
We have seen it. We have seen it.
you commissioned it and saw it.
Yeah, we did.
So, I guess what we're coming back is, at our joint meeting, we presented one or two. So the TND, which is kind of a dense development, as well as the conservation PUD. There's also tools like Paul was saying about underlying zoning. So when we're talking about potential neighborhoods, I don't think the commissioners were making the leap to say that each of these white areas on the map would be that dense neighborhood. And that's part of the feedback that we're interested in. That is one potential outcome, but not what the commission is saying. This is what we want to go forward. That's why we're having this conversation. We are very interested in your opinion. So the notes about what the commission's discussion was last week are not what I would say a recommendation to you, but a guidance as to what our initial conversation was for feedback and your comment. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jessica. Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you, Councilor Reilly. So maybe this would be a good point to jump into what the commission's discussion was last week. So again, their starting point was these white areas. Would this be an okay time to talk about what their thinking was as to how to, what regulatory tools to look at?
Well, unless there are some other counselors who would like to weigh in terms of what they are thinking about, and I will just quickly weigh in and then we can hear what the commission talked about. My preference would be, and I think the whole purpose of IZ was to looking at these 8 circles and the white portions in them, is to minimize development there in order to protect the natural resources and sustainability of our community. And so, I could certainly see a conservation PUD in some places, but I had hoped there would be, I guess, more conservation of grasslands, of along waterways, of habitat, more than you did, frankly. So that's my perspective of this, but I would be interested to hear what your I listened to some of them because Ted's on the committee, but he wasn't able to get into the last one, so I didn't hear your most recent one on the 22nd, I guess it was, or the 29th. But I certainly would be interested in hearing what the commission came up with as their conclusions.
Ellen, this is Tim. My video is on the Fritz. Can I comment?
Yes, you certainly may. Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate what the Planning Commission has talked about, and I want to hear the comments soon. But my only commentary is that, as you descend south in the southeast quadrant, in my estimation, you get closer and closer to this natural buffer zone around Shelburne Pond. And almost all the land surrounding it has been conserved, and moving up into South Burlington with the Eau Claire property as well. And the Scott property is part of the city. And we have, impending conservation easements on the Wheeler property. And we have the new Thomas Hubbard recreation and natural area that the city owns as well. So there are areas that we've outlined very strongly because of the reports that we commissioned that have hazards that should be avoided at all costs from being developed. But there are also other areas where we have asked the Planning Commission to provide for us, these new PUDs, these conservation PUDs, where we don't squander land that is buildable, but we do it in a smart fashion where we mix, different types of building types in order to achieve densities that preserve as much open space as possible, yet provide housing for people that want and need it, right? So, I mean, if I look at an area just south of Butler Farms, which is the Marceau property, I believe, right? I mean, that was basically a cornfield, as so was, the Clare solar field for decades and decades. And I don't know how much glyphosate was sprinkled on that to enhance corn production, but there is some wetland area in that northern area of that property, but you do have an opportunity when you have all city services and an adjacent other neighborhood to extend the neighborhood and create a new neighborhood of a new type, which is what the Planning Commission is supposed to deliver, which we asked them to do with the conservation PUD. And the question is, as you get into smaller parcels and you head further south, when you get into those sensitive areas near the Great Swamp, I think that the restrictions could get higher so that we don't squander any land if we can avoid it and not make mistakes like we did where we made a connector between South Village and Dorset Farms running right across the Great Swamp. So there are things that we need to do, and there are other things that we need to look at very closely to try and achieve that balance between buildability, livability, and green open spaces. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. So Paul, do you want to?
Sure. So I'm going to turn on a layer here that is, again, it's going to be sort of circles because the commission has not looked at specific exact boundaries, but they looked through each of the 8 areas, and for each of them they gave some, where they're standing on the subject of neighborhoods, conservation, or a mix. So you're going to see here in a second this bright pink that I'm about to put on right here. So the bright pink areas here are areas that the commission in their discussion felt should be prioritized for additional regulatory conservation, meaning largely conservation, minimal future development. So you'll see that in area 1 in the top right-hand corner, that shows the area that's essentially above 420 feet elevation, which is where our water pressure ceases to be useful. It also overlaps largely with the prime ag soils in that area. In area number 2, you see the northern end of it up against the Marceau Orchard being an area for potential something like adding to the NRP. South of that, you'll see there's sort of a light blue color. That's an area that the commission wanted to target for something like a conservation PUD, but they also gave wanted to be very mindful that those 2 parcels are both part of the Eau Claire agreement that the city council signed onto, and want to be making sure that any tools are not countervailing the whole purpose of that agreement and this city council's significant investment. Area 3 along Dorset Heights, the commission felt that the wildlife buffer that is sort of on the right-hand side of those properties should be widened to essentially the back of the homes that are along Dorset Farms. I'm sorry, Dorset Heights. Area 4, the commission, this is again the area between south of Nolan Farm, between the Great Swamp and the floodplain / stream that runs parallel to Dorset Street. The commission felt that this should be prioritized from a regulatory and non-regulatory perspective of being little to no additional development, something like the NRP. Area 5, they felt, and also the parts of Area 3, I guess I'll stick with conservation, then come back to neighborhoods. Area 6, they felt that the southern portion of that, furthest away from the Mill Market and Delhi, should be prioritized for conservation. Areas outside of that, the ones that you see that don't have blue or pink, are areas that the commission felt jived with the city's goals for compact neighborhoods. So around the Mill Market and Deli, further north on Dorset Street, the portion on the Marceau property south of Butler Farms that is not constrained by the resources that we just talked about, the area that's surrounded by Cider Mill 2, that property there, and then further to the north and east, the commission felt that on the long properties, number 7, that the areas west of the north-south connector roadway would be appropriate for a future neighborhood, whereas east of that roadway should really be protected as part of the Great Swamp. And then for the area at the very far north, UVM has offered to have a holistic discussion with the city about all of its holdings and sort of shared goals. The commission felt that that might be a worthwhile conversation, and so at this time didn't have any recommended changes from the neighborhood designation of that property at the far north end of that. So that is that's the commission's overall big picture discussion. I guess the last thing that I wanted to say was regarding Councillor Emery's note of the 25 parcels. The 25 parcels are an important consideration in all this for the commission. From a regulatory perspective, the city's responsibility has to be looking at the context and not individual properties. And so, whereas there may be a 30-acre parcel right next to a 30-acre parcel that had been prioritized, the city's responsibility is to look at both the 3-acre and the 30-acre. Hence why the conversation is a little bit of a bigger picture. But this is the whole purpose of this conversation, of the commission's discussion and then ultimately the council's discussion of, what do you want to see built as neighborhoods, and what do you want to see from a regulatory perspective remain as long-term open space? So that's my spiel.
Okay. Comments, Megan?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and I appreciate that. And of course, the 20 to 25 parcels that were identified were not intended to be fully conserved parcels, but that those parcels should be treated differently. And so I'm glad to hear you say that they were. That's reassuring to me. And what I would say is, as far as within the Southeast Quadrant where housing should go, I think that if we're considering affordable housing, what we must consider is transportation, is economic development. Where are the jobs in that Southeast Quadrant? And I would argue that they're maybe just north of the Southeast Quadrant, perhaps some other areas, but we would have to look at that. And we have to consider that we have to do more than just build housing. We have to build housing that is a covenant on it to be affordable in perpetuity. Because this argument that more housing will lower the prices is false. It is self-interested, and it is false. And as I said in my meeting with Helen and Paul and with Jessie, where is the affordable housing in Chicago? It's the public housing. That's the affordable housing in Chicago. So wherever government and all of these nonprofits have invested in order to provide affordable housing, that is what will be affordable housing for Chris's sister, for my children, for your children, and also Chris's sister and your children and my children will be able to live in a place where, when there are 100-year floods every 20 years, their houses will not be washed away, where their water, their drinking water, has the potential of remaining clean, where we potentially could still have farming occur because we don't have perhaps money to buy food that is sent in from other places, which will now be increasingly expensive as we move forward. So we have to think very carefully about the life of Chris's sister, as well as the life of the children that we hope will move into these homes. How will they be affordable? It's not just by building market housing. It will not work. We have to invest in affordable housing, and we have to have covenants in order for that housing to remain affordable in perpetuity. And we have to think about farming and providing local foods, local produce. My daughters told me she was learning America the Beautiful, and that first stanza is the original poem. And what happens on those prairies, the fruited plains? Well, those fruited plains are in drought right now, and we might not get fruit, or they're burning in California. So when I heard her recite that to me today, it brought tears to my eyes. And I said, you know, Naomi, if you'd like to, say it to the council, because that song will soon be outdated, and we will have to rely on what we have in our gardens. And I'm being very serious. This is an emergency. It has been declared an emergency. And so, yes, let us provide for Chris's sister, for our children, but let us make sure that they have everything they need. Just having a house that will be destroyed and where you will not be able to afford it is not providing for them. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm sorry, it's emotional because it's very real. I'm talking human extinction. Every day, 150 species go extinct. 150, 150. And we're a species. And we're not the smartest or the most resilient.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Are there other comments by council members to help clarify?
I would just like to say something, Helen.
Yes.
So, you know, we, in response to Councilor Emery, we are at a certain point in time. We have a certain current state of affairs. We have a common roots organization that grows a lot of vegetables at 2 or 3 locations and makes them available to the citizens of our city, and also prepares that in farm to table and on certain nights of the week. They grow a lot of food. They have a very productive farm at South Village. We also have bread and butter farm at the Southeast Quadrant. It's very productive. They're grazing. They're doing a great job as stewards of the land, right? So we are working on that, or have positive results from those projects, and we will continue to have those. We have an excellent stormwater division that has done a great job ensuring that their number one objective is to make sure, I think, that the water that goes into Lake Champlain meets the state limits on phosphorus load and other pollutants, so that drinking water, which the Champlain water system pulls back up and delivers to our homes, is still drinkable. Right now, apart from changes in our weather, whether it's drought or it's deluges in water, I mean, we have infrastructure that is doing a pretty good job protecting us right now. You can try to plan for the 100-year event or the 200-year event, and I acknowledge that, but our current state of affairs, we have good infrastructure. We have, I think we have good bike-ped interconnection among our neighborhoods. The city is still a growing entity. We still have land that is buildable and can create housing for people that need homes. I think that if you look and see that if you build more housing, depending upon what the cost is and whether it's affordable or not, that you will end up moving people up that conveyor chain from the lower cost housing to the higher cost housing as these families move up in income. And you free up those homes at the lesser cost, and so that gives people the opportunity to move in. The Hillside O'Brien Farm is doing very well right now with lots of different types of people, retirees, people with families, and that's the kind of thing that we want, where people bring and create neighborhoods that are sustainable. I understand the arguments to try and conserve land, and the Planning Commission is trying to give us those tools for those parts of the southeast quadrant that are the most at risk and that are the most natural within our city. And so I think we have to keep our eye on the ball for trying to do that conservation correctly and not waste that kind of land. So I'd like to keep the discussion going forward and not put it in a context of being a doomsday scenario, Councilor Emery. If we can just avoid that a little bit and move the ball forward and get through IZ and come up with the regulations that we asked for in the first place, that would be a constructive thing to do.
Tim, with all due respect, it is not constructive to plan for now. It is constructive to plan for 20 years from now. And that is what I'm asking that we consider here. And with all due respect, I will not call you an ostrich putting his head in the sand if you stop calling me a doomsday. I am being realistic. I am reading science reports, and I take issue with what you have to say.
I understand.
Thank you.
But somebody has to say the opposite, Megan, and give a different perspective. I hear the same perspective.
I think we have heard both perspectives, and I think that's helpful.
Except how much are the O'Brien homes selling for, Tim?
I don't have the exact numbers, but every house in South Burlington is selling for 40% more. Every home is selling for more.
My home is valued at $343,000.
Megan and Tim, let's try to make this a constructive conversation and not firing shots at each other. Matt, did you put your light on? Did you want to say something? And then I would ask if there, if Jessica or Michael or anyone on the Planning Commission, Paul, have any questions, clarifying questions for us? So
my only comment was to say that I see an optimistic scenario here in which we have a inclusionary housing ordinance, which we're committed to creating affordable housing in perpetuity. I think that's a good thing. I agree with many people who are talking about expanding that beyond where it currently is. And we've seen, that as successful in the O'Brien property, Hillside Development, and also in South Village. And I also want to say that we have a real opportunity here. South Burlington is unique in that we have so much demand because we live in a wonderful place. We need to preserve it. We need to protect it. But we're also unique because we have a lot of local land owners who have a real connection to the land, whether we're talking about Mr. Long, or we're talking about Mr. Larkin, or we're talking about any of the properties that we've seen come up during my time at Development Review Board. And the idea that we can, as a city, as a planning commission, work with these with these landowners to develop responsibly, to create a conservation PUD where we're ensuring that the environmental hazards, the parts that we want to protect, are indeed protected, but that we are meeting our need here in the Chittenden County to provide more affordable housing, that we are meeting the need to provide housing close to the employment centers, which aren't going away, UVM, medical center, to reduce the vehicle miles traveled and the carbon pollution that comes with it by providing homes where people live. So I see real great opportunity. I think the Planning Commission and staff has done incredible work. I understand, why these 8 parcels were selected after reviewing it and talking with Paul and Jessica, and I certainly appreciate it. I just think that there's opportunities to not put more restrictions on development, but to use the tools that we have, whether it's conservation PUD or traditional neighborhood PUDs, and to ensure that these environmental hazards are protected, but yet we still make space for new neighborhoods and new people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Helen,
Paul or Jessica, do either of you have any questions for us?
I mean, it sounds like I'm hearing some different views. I guess if you had some any specific feedback on kind of the areas that were circled, the white areas within them, and then kind of those pink areas we circled, or versus, I don't know, it's hard for me to tell if Matt is saying all of the white area should be one of the PUD types versus setting aside the pink. So I guess if you had some, I think Megan was extremely clear, but I think some of the other counselors talked about kind of a mix. And, I think that that's why the commissioners kind of landed with a mix. Like maybe some more of the white area could be additional conservation in some neighborhoods. So if you had feedback on that or what you want the neighborhood to feel like, that could be helpful.
Well, I personally was happy to see some of the pink. That was the first time I had seen those maps. Maybe I didn't go deep enough into the link. Is that on the website that you sent us, Paul?
The pink represents what I described in the memo.
Oh, okay.
So I made these pink ones this evening. So this is.
Oh, okay.
Nobody's seen
Well,
this. This is trying to represent what was written in text, roughly in the memo that was in the council packet. So you didn't miss anything.
So I think that's comforting to me. That's more than what I saw before. And I'm assuming then that you're thinking that what is not pink but still remains white could be developed using the conservation PUD. Is that sort of the conversation? Because some of it still is, important land.
Right. So I guess, Helen, the best way that I can describe that is the conservation PUD is a tool, right? So it's intended to accomplish the city's objectives of how to balance conservation or open space and neighborhoods. And so it's possible to achieve what you want out of a conservation PUD without necessarily being a conservation PUD. In a big sense, the entire SEQ is currently one big giant conservation PUD, in that half the land is in the natural resource protection district. So looking at some of these, for example, the properties in number 4, some of them go all the way to Dorset Street. The objective of striving for largely conservation west of the stream would mean that areas east of the stream over by Dorset Street would be eligible to be compact neighborhoods. Or in area number 1, the areas that are not in the wetlands or wetland buffers and are not at this high elevation would be potentially able to be full neighborhoods. So that the conservation PUD is achieved by having identified the areas that you don't want to build on up front. But that's what this discussion is about. If there should be additional or fewer areas that are set aside and not be planned to be neighborhoods, then this is the guidance I think the commission is looking for as they put together the regulations over the next couple months.
Okay, comment. We have a couple. Michael?
Yes, I just wanted to say that all these parcels or pieces of land are also land that could be farmed. And as you've noted in the news recently, a large amount of land in the Central Valley in California, from which we get a lot of our food, is now being taken out of production because they can't farm it anymore because they don't have any water. And when we talk about local food production, there's no point in just talking about South Burlington. We are not an isolated community here. If we can grow food in South Burlington for Burlington and Winooski and Williston and Heinsberg, so much the better. Tim Barrett was at pains to explain to us that we have a lot of land that can be farmed and we are producing food, but really it's very much a drop in the bucket. And so we should bear that in mind. This land can also be used to produce healthy food for all of us. And my understanding of this evening's meeting was that you, the council, would give us guidance. That's what we're asking you for. Once Paul has explained everything that the commission has done in the last couple of weeks.
Well, unfortunately, I think you're getting you know, mixed guidance, and that's kind of where the council is right now. So I
I
guess
think
you have
it's-
to listen to what we're saying and parse it through your actions. I mean, we have one member who's not here, so it's hard to speak for Tom, but Megan?
With all respect, yeah, I think we've given them guidance in the reports that we have endorsed. We did not endorse John Stewart's. John Stewart's was the initial report until we could get Earth Economics. I'd want that to be heard. Earth Economics is the report that we actually commissioned. Originally, it's in our IZ, not John Stewart's report. That is the report, along with the open space interim zoning report that we have provided, and not just the five of us together, you know, talking about, you know, doomsday and ostriches. We're talking about people who have given hundreds of hours of their time, Jessica and Michael, who had this publicly reviewed and vetted before this was brought forward to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. And I really beseech you, this is reaching a fever point. We have developers with interests. We have landowners with interests on both sides of the issue. But most importantly, you have a public process that is representing the whole community's interest in that open space IZ report and in the Earth Economics report. So please take what you're hearing today with a grain of salt. I do have a letter from a community member. He lives in my district. He really questions, again, Matt, I'm sorry, your interests here are not clear. And he said, Megan, I support everything you are trying to do to help our world and people. I know that Mr. Cota is completely legal in what he is trying to do, but there may be some self-interest that would benefit him. I do not go to many public meetings, but if there is anything I can do to support what you are
Let's not disparage.
May
And
I
I
respond?
understand.
Okay.
But I think it's important for people to understand that the people who came forward today at the beginning of the public comment period, they spoke in favor of us being leaders with regard to the climate crisis. The climate emergency is now the official term. It is not my term. And we have to heed the people. That public process that we included before the pandemic, that was a really broad public process. And when I hear Paul say that those pink circles represent those areas that were publicly vetted and were deemed to be important, I trust that. So I would like to see it. I think that was one of the questions in the chats. Can we see how it aligns to the Earth Economics report and to the 20 to 25 parcels? I think that would clarify some things, Paul. But otherwise, I trust in that process. I just,
May
I don't think that it's mixed.
May I
don't
respond
think it's
to?
mixed.
You wanted to, wait a minute, Michael. Matt, you wanted to make a comment?
I just want to reiterate that I own no land. I own a carriage home, which is called a condominium in the cider mill development. I own no land. I'm not a builder. I'm not a developer.
No, and I appreciate that, and I think we need to be careful with our comments about each other and our
He asked me to read
motives.
that. He asked me to read that into the record tonight. And what I will say is that UVM, the Vermont Center for Research, did a survey of Vermonters. 80% want to telecommute. 80% of survey respondents. So we should not think that everyone in these homes needs to have a car to drive to work. 80%. That does not mean that we're going to have servers in our restaurants who are going to be telecommuting. So we have to think, where should those people be living? And I'm not sure that south of South Village or north of South Village or south of Cider Mill is where they should be living. I think we have to think carefully about where those homes and that dense development and those new neighborhoods should go. I agree. I am not saying no new neighborhoods.
Megan, I do think the Planning Commission has looked at all those reports and has considered them. They may come up with different conclusions than perhaps you and I would like, but I think their process has been both public and included as many different viewpoints as they could get around the table. Some of
I'm
whom
not
were
arguing
around
the
the table
opposite.
during the entire conversation.
I'm not
So-
arguing the opposite, Helen. I've never said the opposite. Let me just make that clear that I'm using me as a straw man. I never said the opposite. I laud the Planning Commission for their public process. But I heard Jessica say that they came here looking for guidance. And all I'm saying is that the reports we provided does provide that guidance. And what Paul had to say, I thought confirmed that they had read the reports.
Okay.
Then it descended into,
Okay.
We
Other
got
things.
that, we got that feedback. Thank you.
Pardon me, Jessica?
We got Megan's feedback. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have, I feel we've had a fairly long conversation. Michael, is this something you haven't said before? Because there are, Joe Larkin and Sandy would like to make very brief statements, and I'd like to hear them and then, move on from there. Understanding it's not a public hearing, but.
Helen, could I briefly respond to what something that Megan said?
Briefly, yes.
Yes. The open space report, I'm sorry to say, the council's acceptance of the open space report gave it no regulatory force at all. And the Planning Commission has not used the open space report at all. Fortunately, the Arrowwood habitat block assessment, the habitat blocks that are identified are coincided with many of those 25 parcels that were in the open space report. But nothing was done by the commission with that report. And nothing has been done, to my knowledge, by the commission with the Earth Economics report. So yes, these reports were commissioned and acknowledged, but they don't have any bearing on what the Planning Commission has done so far. What does have a bearing is that the Planning Commission accepted a lot of what the Arrowwood habitat block assessment recommended. That's one of the best things we did.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, and then I want to go to Joe and then Sandy.
Well, I guess I don't completely agree with what Michael said. I mean, we read those reports, we looked at the areas, and it's not really appropriate for us to regulate by parcel boundaries. Like we said, that is not really the way to go. So we use the information in the open space report to delineate natural resource and science-based delineations of the resources that they pointed out. And we have looked as part of our mapping exercises at how those overlap with the priority parcels as well. So it is true to say we have not picked out a parcel by parcel boundary and said, this is the zoning associated with this parcel, because that's not really an appropriate way of delineating either our land in the city. But we have used that information, and it was a big reason why we commissioned the Arrowhead or the Arrowwood report in the first place, to make sure that we were able to actually create a delineation of those forested areas that was pointed out as very important without having to resort to a parcel boundary line. All of our mapping, we've been able to kind of turn on and off those priority parcels and see how they overlap as well. We also did make the recommendation to you and the council that if you feel like some of those parcels rise to the top for conservation, we feel like that's more the purview of the council to choose land for purchase or conservation, which you've done an amazing job with in the past. So I do think there are ways that the council and the city can use the kind of parcel-based information as well, which we've kind of brought up in the past.
Okay,
If I could just jump in. The grasslands were also priorities for that open space IC committee, as well as for the Earth Economics. So I know that that the Arrowwood focused primarily on the forested areas, but the grasslands and the waterways, of course, were very much central to the priorities that were guiding us in that open space IC committee.
I think some of the pink circles captured some of the grasslands. Am I incorrect in that?
No, that's
Helen, that's correct. So the folks at Arrowwood came to the Planning Commission a couple of weeks ago to speak about grasslands and how grasslands are a tricky thing to look at from a regulatory perspective because they're a managed state of land. If you if you just let them be, they'll become forests in Vermont largely. And if you farm them very actively, they won't be habitat. And so that was part of what led the commission to have the discussion about these pink areas that you just saw of taking a step back from individual resources like a land or a river buffer or whatever it might be, and say, what from a landscape perspective does the city want to see from a regulate to be open space versus future neighborhoods?
Okay, thank you. So Joe, you've been very, very patient. You sent us a letter a little close to the meeting, so I did read it quickly, but if you would like to make a short comment, I would welcome that.
Well, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, I did send a letter and I appreciate, well, first I just want to thank everybody, the council, the commission, Paul, staff. It's, I've heard great arguments tonight and I'm, you know, I just appreciate how hard everybody works at this. And I don't want to come across as having an agenda. I suspect I do. I will hit to the points of my letter, which is we have a parcel. I think that balancing both creating livable communities and conservation is possible under the PUDs as I've understood them and read them. Admittedly, I've got work to do to dig in further. I am concerned about layering on an additional level of restriction to that parcel, only because I've walked it so many times that I think that 420 line is a little arbitrary. And I think we can do a better job if we just work on it in a PUD. On the other extreme, I can see it being open lands and I can see it being tremendous resource for the city long-term. And I get that argument too, but if it's going to be housing in a community, I think we want to limit the number of hurdles beyond what's already in there. And I just caution against throwing a line on there without really discussing it, without really understanding it. And I apologize. I should have brought this up at the planning and zoning, and I missed that moment. So I'm bringing it up here, expressing that I will bring it up there, and I'll make my argument there as well. But I appreciate the time, and I hope this is an example of either a great community or a wonderful open land.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, very briefly, because you sent us a long letter. We've heard from you several times. I know the Planning Commission has heard from you several times, so I think your concerns are well understood.
This is a different one, but first I would like to say I support the chair's assessment that the council is giving a mixed message to the Planning Commission tonight. It's unfortunate that Councilor Chittenden isn't here so that maybe you could have a better sense of the full council. But what I'm pragmatic, and I do believe that the part of interim zoning that relates to the PUDs and master planning and forget that whole label is right up there with the environmental protection standards. And it's my understanding that the Planning Commission hasn't done any work to date under interim zoning on changing the boundaries of natural resource protection districts, except for the mention of expanding one in the memo that Paul sent you. And they haven't done work on changing the boundaries of other zoning districts. And interim zoning ends on November 13th. And frankly, my question is, I think we have to get realistic on whether we can add new products to the interim zoning agenda, because they haven't been part of the scenario that I've heard at the Planning Commission so far. That's it.
And just to clarify, what are the new products? The PUDs?
No, the interim. changing NRP district boundaries.
Oh.
And changing zoning. That's what I heard Paul say, is ways that these are other regulatory methods to achieve the goals that are stated in his memo.
Oh,
Because
okay.
none of these places that he's talking about are covered by the environmental protection standards draft that is out for has had its public hearing. That would be new work. Paul can contradict me if it isn't, but I don't see that there's any time on the schedule for it.
Okay, well, I appreciate your sensitivity to that for sure. Are there any other comments or that we haven't already gone over? I just have a question for you, Joe. Do you often chat with other developers who have own land contiguous to land that you or your dad bought and have owned forever, thinking about how to creatively do things that will both make you money, which is the bottom line for you, I suppose, and support the environment and address some of these other issues? I mean, it's a lot.
Sure. I think broadly speaking, it's a small community in South Burlington as it is, and certainly in the development community, even smaller. I have discussed a number of projects with folks from time to time. Nothing specific comes to mind as so relevant to this conversation. But I think if the opportunity comes up, I want to be on the record as cooperative and flexible, and I suspect there's other folks like that too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll move on. We're a little behind the time, but I think the rest can go pretty quickly. Thank you all for your input and your comments. Michael, what is it?
Grasslands. Grasslands are really not a natural.
You know what?
landscape.
I think we've discussed them a little bit, and I know you have.
No, we haven't discussed an important point that I think we might miss, and that is that Paula correctly said that grasslands require maintenance, and Arrowwood. We asked Arrowwood when they came to the Planning Commission what that would involve, and they said all it needs is mowing or brush hogging every 2 years. That's all you need to maintain a grassland. That's all I wanted to say.
I think you have said that before. I understand that. And I also believe that people who own large tracts of land that are now grasslands and they brush hog it every so often, they do that because that's what they appreciate about their piece of property. And I don't think they're just going to let it go. So
it's a natural asset.
Right.
And the Natural Resources Committee is also aware about the 2-year brush hogging for grasslands.
Right.
So it's not heavy on maintenance.
COVID put us behind the 8 ball with maybe brush hogging some of the property that we own as a community just because people weren't outside working. But that's part of our stewardship. Moving on to number 8, council consideration and possible action on a resolution to establish a committee on common areas for dogs. Megan.
Yeah. Oh, it's something when dogs are an easy topic to address.
They haven't always been an easy topic for this
No,
council.
that's why I'm pointing that out. So I was in conversation with Betty Malizia, and I haven't seen her here tonight. There she is. She is here tonight. And she shared with me various conversations she had with Matt when he was chair of the DRB, as well as perhaps with the O'Brien developers to talk about how a committee focusing on common areas for dogs go beyond just recreation and parks, that it is in fact kind of a planning body. And she also was talking to me about how it is also something for them to consider with regard to waste. with regard to the environment, that it is hugely taxing on the environment, dog waste. And so we were just talking about how all of the things that the large population of dogs in our community would require of a committee to do, and not just a subcommittee of recreation and parks. And I was persuaded that it is worthy of its own committee, which is why I put together, again with Betty Malizia's input, this resolution, which is a revised resolution, not tremendously different from the original resolution to establish a dog park committee. But here you see that instead of a dog park committee, it's a committee on common areas for dogs. So it would be inclusive of new developments. It would be also inclusive of parks where we don't have dog parks, and all the rules that would go into dealing with waste. But it also specifically has to do with dog parks, where there would be, I would say, a more specialized group of knowledge tasked with not only thinking about what goes into a fully functioning and safe, importantly safe dog park and environmentally responsible dog park, but also keeping an eye on it and looking at, you know, what needs to be done when there are heavy storms, or when the gate and the fences, you know, are no longer serving the purpose of keeping dogs in and small children out. And that's something that she has shown through pictures, that our current dog park down on Swift Street has needed some love and some attention. And so it's not simply looking at a committee that would focus on that one dog park, or now hopefully two, with one coming in hopefully this fall, but also more broadly with regard to just the common areas for dogs, which,
great,
as I said, are new developments and new neighborhoods, as well as parks where we don't have dog parks.
Good. So you have a resolution that you would like to offer for the council
Correct.
to adopt. Is there any
Correct.
discussion or questions by councilors? Matt?
I think this is a fantastic motion. I'm glad that Megan put this together. Thank you for doing that. I did have conversations with Betty and attended a dog park committee meeting a couple months ago, and realizing that it's not just about parks, it's about making sure that there's spaces throughout the city, and the opportunity that we have perhaps to ensure that any new developments use that as a consideration. So I applaud the dog park committee for bringing this to my attention, and obviously they brought it to Council Armour's attention. I appreciate Megan bringing this forward, and I would be happy to support this motion. But I'll let any other councilors weigh in.
Okay.
Helen?
Tim, do you have any comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I support the resolution. I just have a question about to what degree would this committee attempt to regulate dog spaces within private developments? For example, I mean, so Eric Farrell provided dog walking areas at the Olympiad apartments and also at Bacon Street apartments, because he said the market was demanding of that type of a resource for his tenants. And so I was just curious, and I don't think the LDRs specify anything about dog, walking areas within certain size developments at all. So I was just curious, is the intent of this committee to try to help provide the Planning Commission with some potential LDR changes that would govern?
Correct.
Okay. So that in conjunction with oversight of the existing dog parks and development of future dog parks, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just like the Natural Resources Committee, and even the Recreation and Parks Committee has really tried to work to bring in, I think that these PUDs came out of a lot of discussions with the Recreation and Parks Committee as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think it's a great resolution. I think, and I think the constitution of the committee makes sense. I would ask Jessie, is the staffing issue, or Holly Reese, is she still here? Yes. Holly, would you like to make a, oh, Jessie, go ahead.
Holly, feel free to jump in if you want. So currently the, sorry, I might get the wording wrong here. The Dog Park Commission is staffed by Public Works. That is the staffing capacity we have at the moment. That will continue. I hope that over the next couple of months, when we have the prioritization conversation, we can think strategically about staff capacity to staff commissions and how we want to provide that direction moving forward. I think on a kind of invited as needed basis, I'm sure Holly would be happy to participate in that, but right now Recreation will not be the group staffing this commission.
Okay, do you have anything to add, Holly, or?
No, I would just say, you know, we've been engaged from the beginning with all things park related and dog related as well. Betty and I have spoken pretty frequently about events and activities that could happen. So from a recreation perspective, certainly plugged in both with the Dog Park Committee, or as it will be renamed. And given the new mission, I would anticipate staying connected as needed. Certainly, these kind of issues were identified from staff. There was conversation of putting a task force together. We initiated that, and then it kind of morphed into this. So certainly work that needs to be done, and look forward to supporting as we can.
Great, thank you. We have a motion made by Matt, I believe, to adopt this. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second. Okay, that's moved in second. Further discussion. It looks like Barb Service would like to make a comment.
Yeah, I would. Of course, I am delighted to see this moving forward. I would really encourage the council and Jessie to move this from Public Works to Recreation. As some of you heard my statement a couple of meetings ago, events and the kinds of things that will happen at the park are not in Public Works sort of what they're prepared for. And Holly does it so well, and she doesn't need anything else to do. But I think that the dog, whatever the new name is, that the new standing committee will be ready. And Betty Malizia gets tons of accolades for Friends of the Dog Parks. And however that iteration comes forward, I think that they will be helped. But I would hope that number one, we're going to see it this year. I'm still not convinced, but I keep my fingers crossed. And that once it's ready to be open, then hopefully that will be the time. Holly, I know you don't need anything more, but you have been so great about events and concepts and all of that. So hopefully it will transition in that direction. But I am grateful to Megan, thank you, and to the council for your support. This has been a long time coming. And I have great faith in Betty and her colleagues that it's going to be a committee that really does do some things that will be really helpful around guidelines for development and that sort of thing. And we'll deal with also some of the issues that have come forward from other parts of the city with their concerns. So I just want to say thank you.
Okay. And Betty, it looks like you want to speak. And I just note your face looks like you're a painting from the Renaissance with the dark in the back. And you know, this no, it looks great.
I really appreciate having a chance to speak here. And I really appreciate all the council members' support of continuing the Dog Park Committee and in this hopefully proposed new iteration. I think up until now, people have thought of the Dog Park Committee as just putting together the plans for a park at Wheeler. And we know, and we had talked and worked on putting together a way to look at identifying other spots in the city that could be dog parks. And after a lot of work and a lot of hours, we came up with very little options, and like maybe one other space that isn't already dedicated to something. And then we, we were told that the committee wasn't needed because there wouldn't be any more new dog parks. And the conversation I had with Matt was in hearing that developments, as the O'Brien development, and like you said, I think Farrell, Tim, had put in a dog walking area, and O'Brien's putting in a dog park. But the question was, so what does a dog park really look like if you're going to put it in a development? If we're going to have, whether we have 10 or 15 new developments and everybody puts in a little quarter-acre park, people aren't going to want to use them. Okay, because I wouldn't use them. I went down and looked at the one that's at the apartments down on Farrell Street, and I thought, this is not a place for me to bring my Sheltie to run, and I don't even think it's fenced in. It's just kind of an small open area. So I think we would like to be able to give some guidance, just put together some guidelines and suggested some information for developers so that when they build, if they do put a dog park in their development, giving them some ideas on where they can locate it, what's the, what do you want to put down for materials that are low maintenance, and, just a lot of stuff we've had conversations about that I think everybody thinks a dog park is just a place where you throw up a fence and a gate and everybody's happy. Well, it's not that. And I think if a developer's putting one in, they want to put one in that that the people they're selling to or renting to are really going to want to, use and move there. And it is. There's a lot of research and a lot of information about development.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, but I think, Jessie, I can't wait to meet you. It's more than just finding a spot for a dog park. It is helping developers understand what's a good dog park, not Cadillac, just a good dog park. And it's also around helping the city figure out what to do around the dog pollution, dog waste and things like that. And that is a discussion that I think it will take more than just a committee with no staff, because we're going to need to have some discussions that are going to be, are going to need staff buy-in. And I think you'll see that, and the council will see that later on, because we're used to not doing anything. I found out there are 8 dog bag dispensers in the whole city. 8 in the whole city, and 2 of them are up here at Veterans where there are no dogs. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things. Anyway, I will stop here, but there's a lot more to the dog park topic or dogs topic than just having a dog park here and there sprinkled out through the city. And we will, I'm positive, I think we can, I think we can really tackle these things and come up with some good solutions for the city and ideas for us to all think about. Anyway, I'll get off my.
Great. We appreciate all your efforts. So we have a motion that's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Ready for the vote? All in favor in supporting this resolution to establish a committee on common areas for dogs. We'll have to come up with an acronym or something. It's a long name. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
You opposed? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item. This is a resolution. We talked about it at the last meeting. What we didn't have, this is the resolution related to the city's fair and impartial policing policy. I think we are aware of what that says and the history behind that and how much work the fair and impartial policing policy task force or committee worked closely with Sean, our Chief Burke. What we didn't have at the time was actually a copy of what the police policy has. That was sent out to us. So I guess I would ask, if that was a request of Councilor Barrett, did that address your concerns, and are we ready to adopt this resolution?
Yes, it did address it, and I move that we adopt the resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? I don't know, is anyone from that group is
Yes,
here? but-
Susan and
Oh,
Nancy are
Susan.
here. And
Yeah,
Nancy,
but-
Nancy Howard.
Oh,
Susan
and
Shanto.
Chief Burke is, I don't know if we need to hear them, from them. I'm happy to just vote, given the time. So, because I thank you for being on this call, but I'm really pleased that we are finally voting for this resolution. So if you're ready for the vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? So the motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much, all of you, for your hard work and dedication to what I think is a very, very important issue. Great. And finally, we have one other thing, but a little bit later than we thought, and I apologize, an hour later than we had anticipated, is item 10. Discuss and provide direction to staff on the Trinity Education Center's proposal to start the Infinite Center, a daily youth drop-in center and after-school program. And Councilor Emery has been working with Dr. Travia Childs on this. I see Dr. Childs is here. Welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry it's so late, but I did notice you got off and probably did something much more constructive, and then you've joined us again, so I appreciate that. So Megan, how would you like to carry on?
Sure.
We got a lot of information, which I thank you for.
Yeah. Well, this is the second time that I've been contacted in order to be the counselor liaison with a private citizen, but also a nonprofit executive director. And Dr. Travia Childs, in addition to all she does for the city as a school board member, she is an executive director of the nonprofit called Trinity Educational Center. And one of its programs is called Infinite, which is to provide infinite opportunities for our young people by providing them a safe space, by providing them healthy activities and choices, as well as healthy food and conversation and friendship. And so I am very happy to really let her speak for herself. She's done a lot of research. And something I've learned, I'll just add in this process, is that there is quite a bit of grant funding for these kinds of nonprofit centers. And I think the role of our city is something that we have to define, and it will be something that will change through time. And I'll speak more to that as Dr. Travia Childs goes forward with the description of her project, just based on what I know that has been done in the past and what is being done elsewhere.
All right, well, thank you. So Dr. Childs, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I will try to keep this really brief. The issue is that now it seems like South Burlington High School is noted as the best high school in Vermont. And then also South Burlington was also on the noted that it's the best place to live. But how can that be when cities like Burlington and Essex has a youth center where their kids can go? We can't teach our kids about drugs at school, with a lot of the budget issues. So Trinity is a place where kids get to be kids. The youth run the center. They talk about programming, what they want to do, and it's a safe space. So my thing is, a lot of times, especially with COVID, it was suicide. A lot of kids are going through a lot of stuff, mental issues. So why not give them a place where they can come, even if they don't do anything, and to be with their peers and to talk about what's going on? And it's not really a program, you have to be here at 5:30 or 6:30. They can decide, well, we want to do this today. And it's okay, because a youth center is about the youth, and I'm not young any longer, so I can't tell you what they like doing, but they can sure tell you. And then I thought about some of the people that are in the community, like Mr. Martin that has a jewelry store. He can come in and do a workshop. Like we're talking about organic farming and taking care of ourselves. Why not teach them that also? It's so much that we can teach them. And I know South Burlington is kind of considered kind of bougie, as what I was told before, but we still have kids. We still have youth that need our help. So no matter how much money South Burlington supposedly have, it is a need. And now how it's set up tomorrow, I meet with Heather, who is over the U-Mall, and I asked her for a space for 6 months for free. So I'm gonna look at 2 spaces tomorrow. So if they can do that, and I know the last thing that happened is that the city council gave seed money and plus paid for insurance. So that's what I'm hoping that happens now.
So the seed money you're requesting, is it $7,000?
That's what they did.
Oh, that's what you did in the past. You haven't established a figure. Is that right?
Yeah, $8,982.
Oh, $8,982. And is that the seed money and the insurance?
No. I don't know how much they paid for the insurance last time.
Okay, I don't either.
Okay.
Helen, if you, can I ask a question?
You certainly may.
Yeah. So when Bruce came to us with the Chill Center proposal, man, Pat Nowak was there then, so it must have been 2017 approximately, right? And we made a contribution then. I think it was $3,000, right? But so I'm just trying to establish some history. Does that sound right?
It was $7,000.
It was $7,000. Oh.
Yes, and
okay.
And it was also open for at least 6 months. Neither my son nor Bruce can remember the length that it was open. But as you might recall, it was closed because H&M moved in and took the space. And what's wonderful is Heather is saying that 6 months is safe for one of these 2 spaces. And
is there
so
equipment left over
that's
from the Chill Center that's available for this project?
No, he gave it to other nonprofits. He gave it to other youth centers because it was all donated. It was all donated.
Yeah. I just didn't know if it was available for this. So. Thank you.
Okay. So I think the question before us is this something we would like to consider supporting? I think we probably need to find out when you get a space and sort of a timeline, Dr. Childs, but if there are some other questions for counselors, I mean, I had one for you, Dr. Childs, and I wondered if in terms of space, and I think I know the answer, but the school department will soon have the, the current city hall that has, a fair amount of space in it. And I wondered if any of that space, if you had considered thinking about the center, maybe in the big, what is it called? The Green Mountain room, I think, the large meeting room. Has a little kitchen, and if that had been a conversation or support from the school.
Where our council usually meets in that building.
Yeah,
right, Helen?
yeah. Yes.
No, it hasn't been discussed. And I think one of the issues is that the youth want to get away from school so they can feel safe and where they can talk, because that sounds like a good idea on paper. But when you take kids leave school and then they're going to kind of see the same people they just left. So can they really talk? Can there really be youth there? I don't know.
Okay.
I can go check it out. I'm not even sure if it's an option.
Right. I just was curious as an option, but I guess if you get free space from Heather, that's a better option, I suppose. Yeah.
Just for temporary, yes. And then I can work on finding other locations.
Okay. And Megan sent us all some good information about the current programs and Jessie, did you say that to everyone, Megan, or was it just to?
Just to you, Jessie and Andrew. I was very curious to know what Essex, the Village of Essex, provides in the way of support to the they call it a teen center in Essex, and just thought it was important information for us to know that they do provide the space. Now it does happen to be upstairs from the village offices and the senior center at 2 Lincoln, so it's right at 5 Corners. And I spoke to the teen center director, who used the ambiguous word interesting, that it's interesting to be upstairs from the municipal offices, which I understood in the manner that Dr. Childs said, is that high schoolers probably wouldn't choose to go hang out above the city manager's office, right?
Well, it's right next to the police station, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted just for the council to know the level of support that it's a very large space. They have pictures on their website, and I can send the website to the other councilors, but they have a pool table, they have a foosball, they have a kitchen, they have a seating area. I mean, they have a really not, and they have couches. They do field trips. I mean, it's not necessarily what Travia will put together. It's her vision as the executive director. I'm just trying to give you an idea of the space that they have.
What
They
other
have
communities are doing. I would encourage you to send that and have the other counselors look at it, just to see what one looks like in one of our neighboring communities.
Sure. And what I learned, and what I think Dr. Childs responded when Jessie asked the question too about funding, is that there are a lot of grants available for this kind of space, because this is an at-risk population. And so this money that we provided to Bruce, just 4 years ago, and that Dr. Childs is asking for, it is, I believe, put to really good uses, because we are serving a community need by providing a safe space, a space where these young people want to go, where they want to have supervision that is not necessarily the same that they get in other spaces, but that it's a different kind of supervision. It's a mentor. It's it's somebody that they know on a personal level, as opposed to someone that they have to perform well for. And I think that that's really important for them to be able to let down their hair and to know that they're accepted for who they are, and that there's love there. I think that's really key. And so I do see that this provides the city a really important service, and that this is worthy of our support. And just speaking to, what our $7,000 plus insurance gave to us 4 years ago, at least 6 months of people going in and using, there was a pool table, there were game consoles, there was a real community, and our high schoolers, including my son, would go in, and they would be, they would lead kind of the feel of the place, right? And there was always an adult on the premises there, just to make sure that, it was just a, healthy activity going on there. But it's a way for our young people to really take on leadership positions as well. So just wanted to say it's worthy of our support.
Okay, Jessie?
Thank you. So because this is kind of the first meeting, the first idea like this that's coming through with me and Dr. Childs, it's so lovely to put a face to your name. Thanks for the trading emails for the last week or so. From a kind of policy and implementation perspective, council runs policy, staff runs implementation. What I would recommend, if the council wants to direct staff to move forward with this, are a couple of things. One, vote to do that, and we will bring you back a recommendation of where we could get the funding to allocate to Dr. Childs, and how and a proposal for what that might look like, whether it's a direct allocation or a mini grant or something like that. Two, we have done a bit of research on insurance, and our current insurance carrier won't let us just insure another organization's space. So if that is a direct ask, I would say we should just build that into the funding request. So the dollars could pay for it, but it would be a contract through the nonprofit. 3, I think that we as the city, and I know Holly's still on, I think Holly's still on the call.
Yes, she is.
Really hear what you're saying, Dr. Childs, about a special, a separate space that is responsive to the youth's kind of vision of how they want to spend time. We also always aspire to ensuring that our programming is responsive to what kids are interested in. So we would love to have a reciprocal conversation as well about how, not through your nonprofit, but through our programming, how we can best align our offerings to what folks might be interested in. And then finally, just so the council knows, Essex CHIPS and Winooski Partnership for Prevention, I think are slightly aligned to the vision that you have. I'm very familiar with those organizations, and they're great partners for the municipal government, especially as kind of external nonprofits advising municipal government. And if this was stood up, I would certainly welcome that. So those are my thoughts. So if the council wants to move forward and direct staff to come back with a financial recommendation, we would be happy to do that at a future meeting. Thanks.
Okay, we do have one question in the chat box from Sharon O'Neill. Do you have a youth panel to inform this? Is that part of the design, Dr. Childs? A youth panel?
No, not yet. No, because I have to at least get something in place or a possibility. But I know a lot of parents and youth also, so that wouldn't be hard to do.
Okay. All right, that sounds like that might be helpful. Matt, did you want to say
I just
something?
wanted to say that, first of all, Dr. Childs, this is good work. This is important work. And in whatever small monetary amount that the city or individuals in the community can provide, we all know that it's the volunteers that make this thing happen. And I agree with Jessie's recommendation. Is this a policy we support? It's a policy I support. And I would urge her to come back with some ideas on how we can support it further.
Okay, Holly, did you want to make a comment since you showed your face, your pretty face?
Oh, well, wait, thank you. My goodness, I'll turn the camera on more often. Well, mostly I had connection issues with my laptop, so I wanted to make sure everyone knew I was still here. I think there's a lot of great opportunity. Many hands make light work, and we always are looking for infusing, different programming. And certainly the high school and middle school group is a hard one to crack into, especially with so many school offerings, but there certainly are some gaps. I welcome further conversation to kind of get heads around the table to figure out who's doing what already. There are some great nutritional programs through Common Roots that happen at the middle school. I think those could be extended to the high school as well. So I think there's opportunities for all of us to, to really celebrate and provide opportunity for this population together, and certainly welcome being part of that conversation and being part of some brainstorming and some solutions. And we've got great marketing. So anybody is, we're happy to partner and reach the people and get the message out.
Thank you.
Okay, another comment from Sharon O'Neill. She suggests being in touch with the Vermont Youth Development Program to include at-risk youth. So that's another contact for you, Dr. Childs, the Vermont Youth Development Program. And then Ariel, did you want to make a comment? You turn your...
Hi, yes. I'm just wondering if we can do more for Dr. Childs than just a one-shot payment of, $8,000. And I would say that programmatically, what a lot of nonprofits face is sustainability. And if we can help Dr. Childs find not just a temporary home for the program, but a permanent home for the program, that we would actually be going forth in a much more sustainable way for the community, for the youth that she's trying to work with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't, disagree that a permanent home is the goal. and it's how you get there. That, you know, it sounds like people are supportive.
And I'll jump in here too, and Dr. Child, stop me if I'm saying too much, but Dr. Child shared that the Rotary Club is working with her as well. And I learned from the CHIPS program in Essex that the Rotary Club in Essex is also a main partner in that teen center. So it takes many hands, just like Holly said, it takes many hands to make for light work. And there are definitely many hands, including at the state level, like Sharon noted. There's Vermont After School, which has tremendous resources. So that I mean, Dr. Childs knows better, but there's just a lot that is available to make this happen.
Okay. So is there consensus that we would like to ask Jessie to pull together a funding source for the city? And I don't know, I mean, maybe it's, I don't know what the dollar figure should be, but it would include the cost of a nonprofit to buy the insurance. And I don't know, maybe there's something that the mall has that works for, you know, kind of an umbrella thing. I don't know.
I recall that for the Chill Out Center was $1,500, but that was 4 years ago. So
yeah,
but it was in my memory $1,500.
All right. Well, Jessie can do that homework. But is that something that the council is supportive of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll look forward to what you come up with, Jessie, as will Dr. Childs, I'm sure. Thank you very much for coming forward with this. And, you know, I applaud your work. You know, I read your business plan, and you have good rules and good, you know, good framework. And I thought that the different categories of age groups and their needs was spot on. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the direction, Council.
All right, item 11, convene as the Liquor Control Commission to consider the old post that wants.
I move that we convene
outdoor
as Liquor
use.
Commission.
So a motion to become a
Second.
liquor control, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I only heard 2 ayes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
we have a 4. Okay, we got a majority now. Okay, so we are now the Liquor Control Commission, and the only thing I didn't notice on the information from the old post were the hours. Do you know the hours? I looked at it and it said, you know,
12 p.m. to 10 p.m. 12 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Oh, okay, I missed it then. Okay.
Yeah,
there
Sundays
any-
through. Sorry, Helen. Sunday through Saturdays, 12 to 10. Yes.
12 to 10.
And
Okay.
and it's a temporary stage structure outside or inside?
It's outside, outdoor.
Outdoor.
Okay.
So
I did hear some concern from residents about ambient noise. So I just.
Oh, okay. We have 2 residents on board to talk about this. Where exactly is the old post? I can't turn my iPad on.
The old Franny O's.
Pardon me?
The old Franny O's by the New Hannaford's.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. And there's an apartment building right near it, isn't there?
Yeah.
The brown apartment building. Okay.
Yep.
So, Almy or Sharon, would one of you want to speak to this? You have some concerns? You have to, okay, Almy, you're.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to go first. So I live in the Red Rocks condos, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is Burlington, not South Burlington. But I am concerned about this permit for concerts. I can hear the traffic on Shelburne Road very easily in my house, even with windows closed. So I know I'm going to be able to hear these concerts. I understand the need for a business to be flexible with being able to, schedule events and whatnot, but the prospect of multiple concerts per week during the time of year when I and many other neighbors in the area enjoy being outdoors in my yard, on my deck, even indoors with my windows open is very anxiety producing and disturbing. Especially for those of us like myself who go to bed early, like right now is past my bedtime. So I go to bed well before 10 p.m. And the concert noise will absolutely disrupt my sleep and my ability to enjoy some peaceful time after work at my house. I'm also concerned about that apartment building across the street, very close to across from the Hannaford driveway from the venue, and I wonder who's looking out for their interests. So I would like to urge the board to consider placing some reasonable limits on this permit, such as concerts perhaps on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday only, or perhaps limiting the number of concerts per week that are allowed. Thank you for letting me speak. And that's all I'll say for now.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, do you want to speak?
I would. Thanks so much. And I just want to recognize that this is like well beyond my expiration date for alertness for a day. So I live in the Arthur Court neighborhood, and I'm representing myself and my neighbors. So Arthur Court is the small cul-de-sac neighborhood just before the one-lane bridge. And even before I became aware of this being on the South Burlington City Council agenda, I know that like I take my dog for a walk at night before bedtime, and I often, before I was aware of what was happening, I wondered what was going on, where this music was coming from. So I do have concerns about the outdoor venue from my home. I can hear music. This is an area, I moved here 6 years ago because it was a generally quiet area, from which was very much like where I moved from Fairfax. And I can hear the music. And I know it says 10 o'clock, but I really feel like it's past 10 o'clock sometimes. And I have concern about the wide span of the approval for this application, that it's 7 times a week from noon until 10 p.m. That's a lot for an area that historically, a long period of time has been quiet after work hours. And when I say that, I mean after traditional work hours, meaning 5, 6 o'clock p.m. I'm also very concerned that the Humane Society resides just above this. And so this is a sort of an amphitheater situation where even if you put up sound barriers, because the venue is lower than the other pieces, like unless you have sound barriers that are so high, like it's not going to impact the Humane Society or the surrounding neighborhoods, which I have already experienced this. So I'm curious who's going to monitor this. And I'm also concerned that there is an apartment complex very close by that is a low income apartment complex, which we are very much in need of in Vermont and in Burlington. And I feel concerned that this was approved with very little notice, very little explanation, and very little concern to the impact of the surrounding neighborhoods. And even though we are a city, I feel like this part of the city is really a neighborhood. Like we know our neighbors, we interact with our neighbors, We recognize them. And this is having huge impact. And I'm not really sure how this got under the radar, especially since South Burlington has also been involved with trying to mitigate the impact of Burton and Higher Ground on the neighborhood. I'm not really sure how one is a concern.
Well, Sharon, this hasn't been approved yet. That's what this meeting tonight is about.
Okay, I misunderstood because
So you got under the wire. Yeah, so that's why we're having this conversation with you.
Like it may not have been confirmed, but I have heard the music for weeks now.
There have been concerts already, Helen. I've received questions from Queen City Park residents. When did this get approved? And I said, I haven't seen it on the council.
Right.
They were already holding concerts prior to tonight.
Okay,
Matt? And thank you, Megan. I appreciate that.
That was the question. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, but I thought maybe Andrew could address what's the history here to catch me up. I've only seen the stage from the road. I haven't actually heard anything because I'm not in that neighborhood, but or known that they had concerts. What do we know from your old role?
Yeah, so I drove by this just this last weekend, and it does look like it's been newly constructed. I know both our fire marshal and our electrical inspector have been out and sort of given this the approval. So I'm not aware of any outdoor concerts that have occurred that have been permitted. This is also an amendment to a current liquor license and entertainment license. My best guess is that this it was approved for indoor use, and this is the application for outdoor use. And so it's essentially an amendment to that original permit. So
my
question was,
I vaguely remember that we allowed them to have an outdoor patio for serving alcohol. But I don't recall that it was also a music venue. So I think perhaps this has morphed, but.
Was this a COVID accommodation? Do you know, Andrew or Jessie?
That's a good question, Matt. Jessie, I don't know if
I don't know if it was a COVID accommodation. I think that we do want to separate two different approval processes. I think they have received the building approval to build the structure, which is a different thing than the entertainment permit to have live music outside. That's what you're considering tonight. So it's on the risk is on them to build a structure if it's built within building and zoning permits. How they will use it in the future, that's what you get to determine tonight. To my knowledge, today was the first time I'd heard that it was operational, and I haven't heard from public safety that it was being used that they have received reports that there was outdoor music happening. So clearly something was going on that we did not know about. And so tonight the question for the council is, how do you want to move forward with the entertainment portion? They can have the structure they want, but what they do with it is before you tonight.
Matt?
Just to further clarify, because I'm looking at this is not connected to their ability to serve alcohol inside or outside. This is strictly, they realize that they can't just get a permit from building permit. They need permission in order to actually hold a concert, and whether they have it or not in the past, that's for the staff to work out enforcement. But this is not connected to their ability to operate as a bar. This is their ability to offer music outdoors.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
we need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I wouldn't support passing it tonight. I think we need to get to the bottom of this and find out. Either have Chief Burke or whoever is the right department look into what's been happening and clarify with the owners, and then consider. I mean, if they still would like to have music outside, then very much limit it. Maybe Saturday and Sunday or Friday and Saturday, and that's when you can have music. or something to
With
that.
a s- With a window. I mean, yeah, it's 7 days a week from 12 noon until 10 PM.
I know, I mean, it's every night, yeah.
who
No,
can-
I wouldn't support that anyway, but.
All right, so we will come, oh, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
You know, I just wanted to clarify that, yeah, this does fall under the city's entertainment ordinance specifically. And there are criteria, approval standards in that, in the ordinance, as well as possible conditions that council can place on it. So we'll come back with further comments on those two criteria. So council does
Okay.
have a fair amount of discretion in this instance.
But is this the right process, Andrew? This is the right process to go do it as a liquor control board, not through any other permitting process? I just want to make sure we're on the right path to figuring this out.
Yeah, so historically, this is the process it's been on. I think and we've sort of, Jessie and I made the determination to keep that this time. But when we go back, you know, we'll make sure that our T's are dotted to make sure the proper authority is making this call.
Almy?
Thank you. I just wondered if there is some way for perhaps Sharon and I to be notified when this will be on your agenda again, because obviously I missed being aware of this earlier in the process, not being attuned to South Burlington meetings so much.
Oh, right, you live in Burlington. Can we, Jessie?
I'll need, you and I are connected now via email, right? Did you get my email earlier? Okay. So if you could share with me Sharon's email, I would be happy to let you know when this is coming back to the council. I anticipate that will be on July 19th, but I can confirm that as we get closer to the date.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Even though I'm Burlington, literally when I walk across the street, I'm in South Burlington. So
Yeah,
that's,
no, we appreciate
that's how
that.
close I am. Thank you.
Right. Well, and I appreciate there's that whole apartment complex that will certainly be, and I know there's children who live there too. So, okay, so we chose to deny this for the moment, and we have no further business as a liquor control board, correct? That this was the only issue.
Correct.
All right, so a motion to come out of our
moved.
liquor control. Okay, it's been moved to second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good enough. Is there any other, we have reports from councilors on committee assignments. Any reports, anyone?
Did
I-
you
I-
have any updates on the airport, Helen?
Well, I was informed today that Jean Richards has been put on administrative leave due to a personnel issue. So that's all I know. So and we haven't had a meeting lately, so that's all I know. Oh, but I do have some good news, I guess, if you like to fly to either Dallas or Miami. American Airlines is adding direct flights in the fall to both Miami and Dallas. So that's good. I mean, sort of an expansion of the opportunities of
Nick
flying different
Longo
places.
Nick Longo is Nick
And
Longo
Nick
gonna?
Longo is the acting director, yeah. So if you had questions, it's a personnel issue, so you're not gonna get any more details, but that's where it is.
And I believe that the work on Chamberlain's HVAC system, Chamberlain School's HVAC system has begun. So
Yes.
that
Yeah.
moving forward.
Right, that's what, I forgot to note that Jessie and Kevin and I met with Bridget and David on the leadership thing, and he did mention that, so. Okay, is there any further business? We don't even have a topic for that, so there can be no further business. we're done. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
A second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, sorry that your first meeting was a little bit longer than you thought, but I think we had some good conversations and
Clearly, I
there
need
was
to
a lot
get
of stuff.
clearly
through a
I need
lot.
to get better at the time estimating. I
It
will-
is always hard, yeah. Well, we'll continue to work on that. All right, so just so you know, I will not be at the meeting on the 19th. So Megan will chair that, and she will also be developing the agenda, Jessie, because I'll be, I'm with my family that week and the following week, so.